Okay, Yap, welcome. I know your name is Brian Barry, but everyone calls you Yap. Or how did that name come about, by the way?
Yeah, I was yapping all the time from an early age. Yeah, the mind, a talking mind. It's a talking mind. It's an active mind. And my older brother gave me the name when I was about 11 years of age, 10 or 11. My name was Yap, and I rejected it for many years. And then I kind of just became, I grew into it, and I'm a public speaker. I've been a frontman of
I
a band.
see.
I've been yapping about the world a lot, so it's kind
Yeah.
of very
So,
apt.
so you've embraced it. It's kind of meaningful, really, because it says something about you that your brother picked up on. Because you talk effusively about reality. By the way, I find you to be an inspiration. I think you're inspirational. You're a poet. You're a musician. You're into metaphysics. What can I say? I mean, and you wax lyrical about reality, and it's something that I wish I could have. I mean, I'm a thinker, but sometimes I'm not satisfied with the words I come up with what enters my head. It's almost like I'm never happy. I'm a bit like a painter who's never happy with a finished piece.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
because I feel like it doesn't quite convey what I mean. It doesn't, um, I find trouble in trying to get across that, I call it like a divine inspiration, like that idea, the ideal. It's very difficult for me to try to convey that to other people, and I feel like the words are lacking with me. But when I look at someone like you, you're an inspiration because you use poetry, and I'm not a poet, but I can appreciate poetry, and you use poetry to convey so much. There's so much into it. It's almost like idioms on steroids. You
yeah, yeah.
can't quite get the meaning
That's poetry.
of the idiom from the word. If you separate out the words in the idiom, you don't
Yeah,
quite get the meaning. But when they all come together, there's an understanding about those words coming together. That group of words conveys a meaning that we can all agree on, that you can't find when you reduce the idiom. So
yeah,
reductionism doesn't work when you reduce the idiom. But anyway, I'll let you I'll let you talk. By the way, you're from Tipperary, am I
yeah.
right?
I'm County Tipperary, yeah, the proverbial
Right.
long
So
distance.
it's an ecclesiastical parish, isn't it? So does that mean you were brought up as a Catholic?
Yes,
And
yeah, I was indoctrinated
I
into the
see.
Catholic Church, yes, and as a result, it sent me on a journey. I rebelled against the church. All young minds tend to rebel. All active minds that are relatively awake, and I just couldn't find structure in it. Sent me on a journey. Sent me on a journey away from God because God
Right.
was was presented in that paradigm. Something outside of us, something in the sky with a magic wand that was looking down over all of us, and I mean, that doesn't, even at 10 years of age, that didn't make sense to me. But,
Yeah.
I've come full circle. Not that I believe in a God now, but there's some, consciousness, the conscious eye for me is kind of a God entity, if you will. And so in that sense, I'm kind of still, and God is back on the table, put it like that.
Yes, I can relate. Yeah, I've
Yeah, yeah,
I've had a similar journey actually. I used to be into the four horsemen of new atheism, and I thought, yes, these guys know everything. There is no God. There is no evidence for a God separate from us. But it turns out that God was a short-sighted. It was just a poorly constructed concept of God, really. And now I find that. The only thing deserving of that label, if we must use that label, would be consciousness, really, because it seems like nothing can be said to exist without consciousness. But yeah, you wrote Holy Man, didn't you? And that was at the time how you felt about the
yes, it was.
church, the institution.
Yeah, it was an exorcism, this cathartic exorcism against the church, holy man, just,
Yeah,
young angst, trying to scream at the world without fully understanding my place in it. Not that I understand my place in it now, but like I said, all of those variables, our lives are made up by a whole chain of events, and we either arrive, three-quarter way up the mountain, which is as good as it gets, or we don't, or we roll back down into the hole of hell. And yeah, so I've been on a great journey, and I've met all the right people and been introduced to all the right kinds of thinkers, and it helped my mind blossom and grow. And here I am on this day with metaphysical ideas and
Oh, I see.
trying to put a picture together, trying to put a big picture together. So yeah, that's what we're all
When
about.
did you first get into philosophy? Was it your drummer, the drummer
Yes,
you were with in 1 Minute
yeah.
Silence, wasn't it?
Well, I've no formal education, and I mean, I look back at my early years, and I was a thinking machine all my life. My mom remembers me counting wallpaper patterns. I would say there's 10,000 triangles and 20,000 squares. I would sit there, drawing my mind around the numbers. So my mind was active. It has always been searching. So that's a philosophical mindset. I mean, what are the philosophers? Only the individuals who are relatively awake. So we label them philosophers, but there's millions of us, millions and millions. And I like that quote I placed on social media the other day by Henry Thoreaux. It's a very powerful quote when he says, "It is for want of a man that there are so many men." It's almost like nature hasn't got the mold right yet, so it keeps churning them out and churning them out and churning, and eventually it will it'll find a man or woman that can transcendentally fit into the whole picture, and therefore we finally have a man. So I've been on that journey. I've been on that journey to understand the self in relation to self and collectivism, and into relation to the collective head and relation to the transcendental sphere, this window, this abstract window we find ourselves in. So it's and Eddie was my first mentor, but I've always been philosophically driven. I know that now.
Yeah.
It was like I had music in my. I said to Matt when I was talking to him, it was like I had music in my mind all my life, but I didn't have the chord structures for music. Nobody has.
Oh, I see.
Nobody had ever. Yeah, I'd never heard the word axiom. Presupposition, a priori, a posteriori. Nobody. In a small town growing up in Ireland, that wasn't your everyday conversation. So I wasn't privy to that. I wasn't open to that way of thinking.
Yeah.
And fortunately, a number of serendipitous steps, and I found myself on a tour bus with my drummer, who was a learned man. He had a degree in English literature. His mum was a university teacher, and he became a mentor, a beautiful mentor. And eventually, he was the one who sort of, he handed me a Henry Thoreaux book one day and set me down the road of, enter the world of philosophy. And
Yeah.
I did. But I couldn't find the answers in philosophy. I mean, I found amazing ideas and amazing. It's helped me put myself together. But everything, there were so many holes in everything. And so I stood back from it all. I went back to the blackboard and I asked one fundamental question. Like, at the end of the day, forget God. What are we trying to write off God or write God in? Who are we? Okay, what is the we? What is the me? What is the I of me? And I'm not the body. I mean, like we're not the body. And I arrived at a set of systemic modes. My work has been based around building the mind, showing like I was interested in like we create systems, but what allows us to systemize systems? That was the premise of my work. What allows
Yeah.
us to systematically approach systems? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and I over time and through deep meditation and taking the works of some of the greats and just meditating and trying to find myself in the phenomenological lens, I arrived at a set of functioning modes, and I refined them into one set. And I believe this set is fundamentally it's what we are. I believe we're a set of systemic modes. One of the modes is identification. We're trying to identify ourselves, and without that mode, we couldn't find identity. And we can't find the body. We just cannot. The body seems to be a process, but we can't identify ourselves in body. So all I can identify is a set of systemic modes that allow me to abstract and synthesize my place in reality. So
Yeah.
that's my starting point.
Would you say, right, that um I like the idea of the a priori modes. Would you say that is something like what Carl Jung was onto? His idea of the Jungian archetypes. It seems like Jung was talking about these archetypes that shape our impulses and our drives. It was like a complex from which personalities and their behaviors and everything else can be derived. Would you say the a priori modes is something like that? Which from which our existence and the way we are and the way we change comes from, or have I got this wrong? I mean,
No, I mean, I think the archetypes, well, for me, they relate to the way we've evolved into the body, into the world of phenomenon and form. I believe the conscious eye sees systemically. I map it like with a system. And I believe it has emerged, like what has emerged, we see form has emerged and all the chemical variables and biological variables, they've all, but what has emerged in it? An observational eye, a systemic set has emerged in it. a systemic set. And this set has merged with reality, and it has merged through the brain over eons, and it has found itself in ego disconnected from source. Okay, so as we evolved to where body, to where the environment, to where the sensorial feeds of the body and all the emotional variables that come with that feed,
Yeah.
okay, there's archetypes written into that structure for me. You know what I mean? Like, you know, hierarchical archetypes, types, and so on, and they're all written into that structure because we had to learn to be the body. Nature, consciousness had to learn to live in form, which to me is just a conduit, a biological, chemical conduit, if you will, that it is moving through as it tries to, in a teleological sense, as it tries to realign with itself, as it tries to regroup with itself and, you know, get back online. So in that sense, in relation to man, there's the archetypes and all that. But in relation to the system itself, I mean, to me, is the system in man, and it's the system trying to know itself. You know, we have spirit
Yeah.
in man trying to know itself in its biological and chemical framework. But when it disengages from that, it's still trying to know itself. What is it of itself? What is the thing in itself? So, yeah, hopefully that answers that by degree.
Yeah, I see. So these modes help you to synthesize your place in reality, and so you have a way of being. Um, and you mentioned Thoreau, so
Yeah.
he was into process philosophy, wasn't he? So do you would you say that the changing and the becoming is more real than the idea that we are discrete entities, set entities that we never change, but then things happen to us and they come and go. So change is illusory, but Thoreau disagreed with that, didn't he? He thought that change and becoming is what's more real, more fundamental. Is that how you would?
I don't, yeah, Thoreau, you know, is transcendentalist, you know what I mean? Like, I don't see him in that light. Again, just to go back to this is where I think we go wrong a lot. And
Yeah,
we're conditioned from the day we're born, sucking on our mom's boob. You know, we're conditioned today. We have, you know, it's an embodied reality we start to wear and experience. And the conditioning of self, the idea of me and you, is so strong within all of us. It's very hard to disengage from it. Through meditation, we tend to disengage from it. But I truly believe, like, I mean, out of a conditioned habit, I'll say me and you and we and so on. That's just a conditioned habit. I
yeah,
do not factor we into the equation at all. I do not premise we, as Kant said, man is a loose idea at best. There's no fixed predicate for man. It's a loose idea, a conventional idea. We've assumed a position that there's man and woman. We just assumed a position. But we are using a system to systemize our positions about what man and woman are. We use a system to systemize. Everything we arrive at is through systems. So the system through the abstract lens cannot synthesize with man or woman. Man and woman are ineffable. Okay, we just can't ground it. It's a running process, a whole chain of events that can't be broken or outlined, and so on. So there is no we. I always try. I think it's important that we, as philosophers and thinkers, start to break away from this conditioned idea of we, of self, of I. It doesn't exist. So, what is it saying? What has arrived at that position? Okay, there's profound implications. What has
yeah,
systemized, like the mode of identification, we identify the self. We're trying to identify what you're saying and I'm saying. We're trying to identify with one another, so we can concur on something. So we have the mode of identification, and the mode of identification cannot identify the body, but it can identify the fact that it can't identify the body, leaving the mode of identification in place. So there's a whole set of a priori modes, of systemic modes that make up one seeing eye. Like, you know, the leg bone connected to the knee bone, categorization connected to unification connected to configuration, connected to combination, connected to extension, scale, scope. There is a whole field, a whole constellation of modes that I look at through meditation as a all-seeing, observing, systemizing eye. I believe this is what we are until we can say more. This is responsible for all knowledge fields. It enters, whether it's Lecoq, Husserl, Plato, all of them systemized their positions in reality. So there is no me, there's just a systemic I. What are the implications for that? What's that trying to emerge with? So on and so on. So, you know, and to go back to I skipped from your question about process and learning, but sorry, yeah.
no, it's fine. So these modes would be experiential, and through them, would you say that human beings are doings of consciousness? So practically, we are currently identifying with something, with being something and becoming something. Um, You know what? I liked what you said in that video, the man who found the mind, because
Yeah.
you said that you said pe people who
Sorry.
identify as coming from a particular country or going back, say, 100 years or something, and saying, "Oh, these are my ancestors, therefore I identify with that." It's a bit
Yes.
silly because you can always go further back, can't you? In evolution, say our several million great grandfather was a fish. So if we all go back to that, we
Yes.
all converge into a unity, and then we find something in common. And if we even go before that, then
Yes.
it could even be pure consciousness, intrinsically before we become anything. It could be just consciousness, one mind. And right there we have unified us all in a way.
Yeah.
You've put it much better, but yeah, it's something like that. I'm
Well, that, well,
I'm riffing on that.
that comes down to experiential realism that you talk about. That, what are we embodying? What are we embodying? So, I can say I'm Irish and bring it back a few thousand years, but that's only a conventional way and a convenient way of thinking about culture and our place in this world as we try to thrive and live and have our babies and have our relationships. And it's a convenient way of thinking because it helps us survive and organize our lives and so on. But when we want to get serious about ourselves and come to humanity's table, we're in an abstract window. This is what we are. Abstraction is the dominant eye. I mean, in a conventional way, I have evolved my brain. We have that dashboard that we all see reality on. I can see you, face, eyes, and all that. Okay, we accept that. But immediately I know you break down to molecules. That's the abstract window. Okay, the abstract window is the dominant eye. We see through abstraction, and in the abstraction is where we see ourselves. And if we look in the window of abstraction, there's no Irish, English, male, female, black, or white. So we have to be serious about ourselves. So what is the thing that abstracts? That's part of what we are. That's part of we're not our arms and our legs. If an alien asks me, what are you? We're not arms and legs. We're not limbs and organs. They're just the architecture. They're just the infrastructure that we operate through while we're in this realm. But we have,
Yeah.
because we can abstract that as infrastructure. So we are an abstracting eye. Okay, so I'm not Irish. I'm an abstracting I. You can't stick a flag in that. There's no division in that. There's no bias in that. There's no, you know what I mean? Like there's no class division in that. We're a phenomenal species carrying a phenomenal lens that has the ability to abstract right back to fish and bring ourselves forward. Abstract spirit, abstract biology, abstract physics, stars, and the compounds, coming out of the stars that make us up. That's an amazing measure of our species.
Yeah.
And that's how we have to begin to. So we embody that. That's my point. That's an experience. That's an experiential realism. We are embodying that. It's not something that's I've just, I don't walk down to sit down through London today and see that. There's no experience that gives me that. That's abstract thought. That's an abstract window that we're in. And therefore, that's where we have to go to know ourselves. There's nothing out here to know. There's nowhere to go out here. We feed ourselves, we keep our bodies thriving. Even if we land on the moon, we'll feed ourselves and keep our bodies thriving. There's no
Yeah.
out here to head towards. So the journey has to be an inward journey. Sorry, I'm just to digress, but I believe evolution itself is an inward journey. That from the mental point of view, from the
Yeah.
metaphysical, cognitive point of view, that we've arriving at ourselves out here. It's important that we learn to understand the universe that we are of. Molecularly and the quantum realm. These are all important fields of knowledge for our species. But
Yeah.
when we want to know what we are in spirit, in mind, and consciousness, we abstract from that. And it's in that abstraction and how we hold it, we sit in ourselves. And that's an embodied perspective. And that's where
Yeah.
science, what I've just said to you there for 2 minutes, waxing lyrical, is we can see that. See, people, these eyes don't see. We see through abstract around inferential sets. We infer around inferential sets and we draw topological networks up around them. That gives us knowledge, just through abstraction and systemizing. This is sight. We see through abstraction that these eyes don't see anything. They filter light, if you will. They're complex tools, but they don't see. So we're able to see into being fish. We're able to see into World War II right now. Look at the way we see. That's sight. That's metaphysical sight. And that's an embodied reality. That's where knowledge comes from. So we're trying to evolve. We're trying to emerge. Like what has emerged? We're not, we have emerged in reality, but the I hasn't fully emerged yet with itself and with reality. We're still emerging. So that gives us the impression of this transcendental realm, this idea we have to reach more ground, new landscape, heaven, whatever, that because we're not emerged yet, the mind is trying to emerge with body to understand it, but it's trying to emerge with itself. So we have emerged, but we haven't emerged with reality yet. And it's an important distinction.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
see. It's a kind of knowing thyself. It's almost like it's learning to almost like in a Neoplatonic sense, go back to the source. And in order to do that, we have to kind of experience this life, but at the same time realize that it's not really real in the sense of, these are illusions, these are experiences, and we can derive many illusions and many concepts, but at the end of the day, they don't last. They're ephemeral.
Yes,
Whereas there's an underlying reality that's kind of eternal, but doesn't seem to find solid expression in this reality. But it can be conveyed by finite or transient forms and concepts. These transient forms and concepts can allude to that eternal reality, the unalterable truth.
yes.
And maybe we're searching for that. Maybe if in some way we've emanated from that source and now we're trying to transcend it back to the source.
Yeah.
And this is a journey, and maybe it's for the sake of journey. I mean, what do you think?
Well, just to get back to alluding, philosophers allude to complex, perspective through complex perspectives. We allude to things. For example, the idea we're all interconnected and it's all oneness. It's an all oneness frame. We allude to that, but that doesn't tell us what it is. Alluding doesn't tell us, doesn't ground anything. We
That's
allude
right.
to it.
It
You never
doesn't
know.
satisfy the intellect.
It
It's
doesn't. We
it's a
allude.
narrative that lacks.
But therefore, the system knows that abstractly. We know where we are on the chessboard in the Socratic sense. Okay, where ignorance is a complex ignorance. It's not just we're ignorant in a black blind darkness. Where we have a complex ignorance. Okay, and it allows us to conjecture in an intelligent manner about the reality we're in. But we must not forget we're taking baby steps. Like, for me, we have, through the phenomenological lens, we have to lock. I often think of the mind as a spanner and ontology as the nut, and we have to find a way to lock the spanner down onto the nut. But that means we have to understand the function of the spanner. Okay, what's the Rubik cube of the mind? That's what the modes are about to me. They give us all the squares of the Rubik cube and how it lines up. So it's
I
like
like that.
yeah, you know what I mean? Like, so the first step is an epistemological ontology. We have to map the mind, that we understand the compass of the mind so we can enter the metaphysical realm. Now, if you think about the evolution of mankind on an evolutionary clock, say a 24-hour clock, only in the last 10 seconds are we actually being serious about ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, we've had shaman and all that, different shaman and all, but we're not long into heavy abstraction. We're at the interface of metaphysics now, and how that transition, that liminal state from the physical into entering the world of metaphysics properly, is we have eons to go. That's
yeah,
why that's why it feels so complex, and we allude to things long before we can ground them. That's the thing. We can allude to a beginning and an end, and where we can ask questions like, where did it all come from? Does it have a teleological track that it's on? We can ask these questions, but alluding doesn't answer them. So the questions appear long before the answers, and therefore we have to accept as a species. We're a beautiful species. We're a
yeah.
phenomenally. I love humanity, and the idea that we are monkeys off a tree and here we are waxing lyrical about abstraction, and you know what I mean, like a consciousness and the binding problem and the hard problem of consciousness, and the fact that we can ask these questions as monkeys says something about the phenomenal journey we have come on. That's a structured, embodied journey.
Yeah.
We're embodied around the whole evolution. It's in us. We can focus in and bring our attention to any point on the evolutionary compass right now, abstract it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and there's movement and transcendental movement and scope and scale in that. That's our measure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's kind of like a learning process, and also there's a lot to be said about what we pay attention to as we go about our lives. And I was going to ask you, what do you think about morality? Because there's this idea of the good that most people aspire to, and even those people who uh, lack morality, the most unscrupulous of us, it's in
Yeah.
their interest to come across as moral, and they often play a
Yeah.
deceptive role. So, what's your views on that? It's really strange.
Well, after an evolution out of the darkness, okay, came out of the darkness into alphabets and into abstraction. We got lost along the way. We lost sight of source. That seems to be the case, and we've certainly lost sight of source. We were an emotion. We were an emotional field that didn't understand the mechanisms of its own mind. We got lost in scattered ideological hats. You mix that in with all the emotions of anger and hate and love and indignation and all the tensions between all of those. And then you mix that in with Machiavelli thinking and sadism and narcissism and psychopathy and all the trauma through the
Yeah,
brain. So you have to consider it as a big amorphic amorphous lump of cognitive chewing gum that we're stuck in. And in that, we're trying to measure morality, but we're a species trying to apply morality to a scattered head. Okay, so but we have these a priori ideas of morality. But what is it essentially? What is it fundamentally? It's the idea, that I respect your sovereign rights to be and you respect mine, that we don't exploit, murder, or rape, or steal from one another, that we don't lie to one another. Because, I love when Peterson broke a lie down to me. He said, who are you to undermine the fabric of reality? It's a beautiful take on a lie. If you lie, it's not just a lie, you're undermining the fabric of reality.
Of reality,
of reality itself, how we function. So morality, if it just comes down to, I know it's a shifting compass with the world we live in, the environment is always changing, but there are core fundamentals to it, to respect the sovereignty of each individual, okay? To bring knowledge, to enlighten one, to inspire rather than impose. There's morality in that. Rather than walking into society, say that circumcises or has infibulation, mutilation of the genitals for young girls, say, we don't go in and impose our way of morality and say, you are damned for doing this. We bring in our more relatively enlightened ways and we discuss it and we have intellectual conversations at humanity's table. There's a morality in the movement of that. So there's a morality, but morality applies to the body wanting to thrive. I don't believe the system itself, the system in us wants to do right by us. I often say nature's not out to fuck itself over. It's just nothing in nature's out to fuck itself over. It just functions and the way it functions. It's not out. So the morality applies to nature wearing the body, but morality itself doesn't come into the equation of the system itself, the conscious eye trying to align with its own nature and move into the metaphysical verse, because there's nothing to be immoral about in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's just two perspectives. Yeah. So morality only applies to this realm. Yes. And like I said, there are Machiavellian twisted thinkers who are impoverished. They're impoverished in mind and heart and spirit. They're source. And the impoverishment comes from it's a dysfunctional, it's a disabled mind.
Yeah.
It really is. It's all the transgressions speak of a disabled mind and an impoverished mind. So,
the Machiavellians and the Machiavellians, the tyrants, they seem to be misaligned with something. It's almost like they play a role. They try to pretend for other people. They pretend that they've got the best of intentions, but it's almost like they are submissive to their own ways of, they have this tendency to lie and to be deceptive, instead, and they're not really true moral agents, or they're not acting out the potential to be a moral agent. Instead, they are giving that impression. And I think, like you said, it's almost like they're their own worst enemies, because if you treat others as though they can be deceived and you don't care about how they feel, how are you treating yourself? And at the same time, are you thinking about your future self as well? It's almost like they tend to be very focused on, ironically, because the mystics and the meditators, they tell you to focus on the present, right?
yes.
But in a weird way, it's almost like the tyrants are focused primarily on themselves in the present, to the exclusion of everything and everyone else, because they're so they tend to be narcissistic and self-interested, but at the same time they don't care or think about what's going to happen to them in the future, their future selves. It's almost like they've excluded their future selves. I only care about now, what's going to be good for me now. And at the same time, because they have that attitude about their future selves, they also have that same attitude to the selves that exist at the same time as them, the present selves, other people out there. I mean, is it a weird way of looking at it, or
no? That's exactly how you summed it up. There is perfect, but there is like you said, they're not aligned, they're misaligned, which suggests by definition there's something to align with. So I mean, this is where we're coming from. And we can only call misalignment if there's an aligned position. You know what I mean? Like
right.
You say from a biological point of view, you're aligned. Your nose is breathing air right now. Your eyes are seeing, and you're sitting and thriving in the environment. And if somebody walks in right now, just to be kind of a bit graphic about it, and punches you in the nose, they knock you out of alignment with the way things are meant to be. They lock you into a state of misalignment. Okay, but there is an aligned state, and that's what we can call the dysfunctional players. And we can also, but when it comes down to the unexamined life is not worth living. So they don't. When we examine life, The reality is many people are missing out on the true magnificence of life, and that's a sad state of affairs. But here's how I often sum that up, and I'll get back to your point about those misaligned players. Um, I like the analogy I was saying to Matt about, when for every 1,000 turtles that hatch on the beach, you'll see this in the David Attenborough program, yeah. For
Yeah,
every 1,000 turtles, one makes the ocean. But there are millions and millions and millions of turtles, so one out of every 1,000 is a large number, meaning
right.
nature ensures itself. Now, I often
Yeah,
think of the tortoise on the beach like humanity, a parody with humanity, parallel, that they become disorientated, and seagulls pick them off and fish eat them, and 99,
yeah,
they
yeah.
get eaten.
Seems like an awful waste for just one
Yes,
to make it.
but like one sperm and 200 million are wasted. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
My point is nature ensures itself. So, with that analogy in mind, I see humans as turtles lost on the beach, and only one out of thousands makes the meta ocean. And even when we make the meta ocean, it's so deep in there and complex, many of us get lost. We all get lost by degree. Bigger fish eaters, and Kant comes along and swallows us up, and we're like, fuck. And it's a
yeah,
deep ocean, and some of us run out of it going, I don't want to enter the world to that degree
yeah.
because it's too heavy. It's too heavy. And nerds like us go, fuck this, we're going swimming in the deep dive. Yeah, we want to know it. So we're turtles that make the meta ocean. The rest become disoriented. They build empires. They, build burger empires, and they get involved in just the circus, and they chase the material immediacy of the material world, and the buzz and the thrill, and vice drives everything rather than virtue. Look, that's only for a few. The majority of good people doing their best, trying to have a spiritual sense of the world. But again, I feel nature, unfortunately, we're moving along, we're moving through different paradigms, we're moving through, we're transitioning as a species. We've transitioned from fish to chimp, and chimp into Neanderthal, into Homo sapien, if you will. And there's a long way to go, and along the way, all the turtles are getting eaten up.
Yeah.
And nature is ensuring itself. Nature is, the teleological self has one outcome. It's aiming to get back to itself. And along the way, you break eggs to make omelets. And as a result of trying to transition through a body that carries an emotional field, that doesn't understand its own apparatus, that's a fucking recipe for disaster. And here we are with disasters.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? We're caught up in the turtles who stayed on the beach building empires, and the ones who are a bit warped and angry and indignant and so on. We're in that big amorphous bubble of madness, as I've said. And
Yeah.
therefore, we see the dysfunctionality and the misalignment. But underneath all of that, Thoreau was about that. At the end of the day, underneath it all, he said the truth is being carried. Inside all the chaos, inside all the dysfunctionality and misalignment, the truth is being carried by individuals. We're trying to align ontologically with reality. Can we know
Yeah.
it? We're just on a wild goose chase, but we're trying to align. And that says something about us. We're carrying the bastion of truth and hope, and, for future
Oh,
generations.
that's you've put it beautifully, actually. And there's a kind of dichotomy there between chaos and order. And you also find that in music, funnily enough. It seems like you can derive the most meaning when a piece of music has a just the right balance between, say, a Dionysian sounds and Apollonian sounds, chaos and order. It can't be too chaotic, otherwise it just sounds like a cacophony. And it can't be too
Earth and jazz.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's I'm still a fan since my teens up until now. I'm still a fan of new metal music because it's raw, it can be aggressive, it's expressive, but then sometimes there's a melody there, or like everything calms down, and it's building up, and then suddenly there's an explosion, and I like the energy. I like the energy of
Catharsis.
the
It's
music.
catharsis, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
cathartic. In a
yeah,
mosh
it's
pit,
cathartic,
I
absolutely.
love metal music. I love the catharsis of the mosh pit. It's just
Yeah,
amazing. It's
the
amazing.
guitar riffs and
Yeah,
everything. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
everything just comes
Yeah.
together, and it's just so meaningful, so beautiful. I know many people would disagree out there, especially people who don't really like rock music, metal music, but I see the meaning and the raw human emotion, and you in 1 minute silence convey that so well. I know you were young in the 90s,
Yeah,
younger, uh, but there's still something there, this emotion just begging to come out, and you get that across, and it's almost like it's the words, it's the theme of the songs, and also the expression and how you get the lyrics across and the emotion that you use, and the intonations change, don't they?
Yeah, I mean,
It's almost
it's about communion for me. You know what I mean? Even
yeah,
we all have, we're some are into jazz, some into music, into metal music, into opera, whatever taste floats your boat, and so
yeah,
on. All the different cultures have shaped us. We all have our own sort of idiosyncratic colors, if you will. Makes the
yeah,
world wonderful and beautiful. But at the core level, when we listen, when you have 100,000 people in a stadium all tuned into a beautiful piece of music, that's communion. There is a rawness in it, whether it's metal in a mosh pit, it's communion, that catharsis, that wanting to belong, that screaming to belong, that screaming against government, the corruption. There's
yeah.
more going on than just screaming and going, fuck the system, we won't do what you tell us. We won't do what you tell us because there's a core feeling of communion, and that's the antithesis of it. So in my book I was writing about called Man Has No Voice, I wrote a little story about to explain communion, and music is in this too. About Chris Hoy, he's an Olympic athlete. Chris Hoy, Sir Chris Hoy. Anyway, he's a six-time gold medalist, and
Yeah.
he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And last year, the rugby was on TV, and Ireland were playing England. And Chris Hoy walked out at the beginning of the match to hand over the ball to the referee. That
Yeah.
symbolic gesture one. And he was after relaying his story 3 months prior. But anyway, when he walked out, the stadium shook with love pouring down. Never, not to mention the millions around the world. I was on TV, and you could feel the love just that pour down for this human being. We were recognizing his family, his sovereignty, his beauty, his everythingness, his importance,
It can bring people to tears. Yeah.
the
It's
fragility of
phenomenal.
life.
Yeah.
And in that moment, we were all shooting from the same cosmic hip. We were all shooting from the same spiritual transcendental core, the foundation of communion.
Yeah.
And if aliens had been watching that stadium in that moment, seen 100,000 people in the same frequency, okay, that's what unites us, that core. So we're always trying to get back to core. And I think music gives us a sense of core. Whatever music we're into, music transports us, and we are moving with it. If you're being transported by a piece of music, you are being transported, and you're being transported to core, into a state of communion, into a state of belonging. So that's why we connect to it in such a metaphysical, transcendental way.
Yeah.
So whether it's a football match or whatever, it's the group together, chanting together, that tribal chant. In that chant is the sense of belonging, of the sense of wanting alignment. It's the holding together in this big, scary, existential fucking hole.
Yeah.
And so core is so important, to get back to core, the sacredness of core, and understanding ourselves at core, because core is where the answers are. If you want to understand what Irish and English are, get into the abstract window and go into core, and you're gone from Irish and English. If
Yeah.
it's not about the football game, the rugby game. It wasn't about the player in that moment. What were we measuring? We were measuring something core about our species that
Yeah.
wants to align with itself at the deepest sense of self. It's beyond the music and the rugby game and Chris Hine
Yeah.
handing
There's
up.
something that transcends it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're at war with divisions, and I'm like thinking, whoa, that transcendental magnitude binds us, and yet we're all scattered. It's because we don't know how to sink in and remember that. Because
Yeah.
we're conditioned to be small people. We're beautiful, but we think we're man and woman. And we look at my car, look at my fucking watch on my house, and that's tiny. Without
Yeah.
core, you know what you're
Those are
shooting for.
materialistic pursuits, aren't they?
The materialist,
They're really empty. Yeah.
oh, fucking empty.
Spiritually empty. Yeah.
Spiritually, devoid of anything, and just spiritually empty, and the important, the wealth of understanding. You're on a planet going around the sun. The wealth of understanding, you have a chance on this rock. The wealth of understanding, you can examine the self and the other, and go in deep down after the self, and accept and surrender to it, is the most phenomenal. I tell my son that you're on a planet, that's your journey. That's
Yeah.
your getting a job and surviving is one thing, but that's not your journey. And people often moan out there, I don't have a ticket to the concert, or I don't have a ticket to the festival, or I can't afford to go to the cinema. But you got a ticket to planet Earth. You have a ticket, and that comes with melancholy and depression and grayness and moments of brilliance and gratitude and resentment. That's part of the package. But
Yeah.
that's a phenomenal package to be part of. You
Yeah.
know, give me all of it.
Absolutely.
Give me all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The band 1 Minute Silence used to be called Near Death Experience, right?
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
how did that come about?
Well, when we signed our record deal, the company made it known to us straight away there were many bands with the name Near Death Experience, and they said you can continue using it, but it might just end up in a lot of paperwork headaches. And not that we didn't love our name, but let's just change the name before we begin on this next level of our journey.
Yeah.
The magazines just announced we were called 1 Minute Silence now, and we were really glad we changed the name then because it's a great name.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like 1 minute silence. I was just wondering if there was some kind of inspiration behind the name near death experience, or who came up with the name near death
I did.
experience?
I did. When you're 20 years of age, it's all about how cool it sounds.
Oh, right, I see.
And it was
I
near
see.
death experience. It just
Yeah.
sounded like really cool, man, my near death experience.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was wondering, as someone who has been looking extensively into near-death experiences and all the studies, and I've tried to look for patterns in what people report, and
yeah,
I'm thinking maybe that could improve a metaphysical theory of reality. If we look at the patterns of what people are saying, maybe it can inform us metaphysically as to what's going on. And many people say, "Oh, I felt at one with everything," or "I could read other people's minds while I was out of body," yeah, and stuff like that. So I was thinking, oh, could that have inspired Yap and the band to
yeah.
to to come up with a name?
No,
But
no, it
yeah,
was just cool. But in relation to what you just said there, again, if we premise we, me, you, then the idea that I, me, dies. But I don't have an I, me that dies. I don't see a you that dies. So what question? What's the implication for that? Yeah. So to me, there's a system, and the system is permeating everything. That consciousness permeates everything. Yeah. Like we share the same oxygen field. We don't have a separate.
yeah,
So we can't see the oxygen, but we share the same field. And in the same way, as an analogy, we share the same conscious field. It permeates through the brain. The brain is a receiver, if you
yeah,
will. So that system is that it seems to be a continuum. There's no break in the chain. So
yeah,
the systemic I is living on. There's no death for it. So when we have near-death experiences, whether we do or not, I can't speak to that because I've never had one. I can only allude to what secondhand opinions, whether intelligent or not, what other people say. All I can have is a secondhand opinion, but I don't see the me and the yap dying anymore. I don't think of death that way. The body
yeah,
dies. So does the system have an impress when it dies? When the body dies, it can still feel itself in that body. Maybe we feel that's the system itself. There's some kind of an impress, and it comes back into the ego and has a feeling of remembering the pattern it's actually on anyway.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So when I die, the body drops away. I'm not waiting to find, yeah, where are you? Or shouting for my nana or my mom, because there's no ear in there, there's no
yeah,
mouth. So
yeah,
what might be a suspended set of modes that I am in body. Okay, I might be a suspended set of modes ready to, like a new sperm, being ready for the next phase. And I
yeah,
might be a system, right? Just breathe into it, if you will, and start to systemize the reality I'm in, the new realm. Am I a turtle after entering the meta ocean and my body's gone now? And that's a state of panic. That's a state of fucking panic. If you're like, what the, if we're awake, if you actually wake up in there. So is that the system? So I'm kind of preparing my mind as a system that when the body drops away, will the system hold for a second long enough for me as the system to think?
yeah,
So I think the system is the Kant said, and Schopenhauer, we like, for example, we can't know the thing in itself. But I believe that's a fundamental error. I believe we are the thing in itself. The question then is, can the thing in itself know the thing in itself?
right,
And you know what I mean? Man is the disembodied state. It's a temporary process. Man is a disembodied. We're not an embodied state because we've never rounded it up and grounded it with a predicate. It's a disembodied state. So the system is in a disembodied state of reality. Okay, trying to fully emerge and embody itself. You see
I
what I mean?
see.
So
Yeah,
I'm wondering. So that thing to me wants to live on, but it wants to live on. It right now it's still in separate bodies. The idea only through abstraction can we ground ourselves as one thing. It seems to be the case, but
yeah,
can it wake up in another body and remember itself? Remember that it was in a body as a system, not as me or you. It
right,
remembers itself as a set of modes and it goes, all right, I was awake in that body, that person as this, and I can continue now and have whole domain over self and so on. So
right.
yeah,
So the transition between life and death, and physical death, right? Because in the idealistic sense, consciousness would carry on. It would be almost like waking up from a dream, And when you wake up from your sleep and you remember your dreams,
Yeah, yeah,
you sort of look back and think that I wasn't quite myself. I was thinking differently in the dream, and I actually absorbed the absurd and took it to make sense.
yeah,
All of a sudden the absurd makes sense in the dream, and you find yourself doing things that you wouldn't in real life. For example, I quit smoking years ago
yeah,
because I was coughing too much. But then I still had dreams where I was smoking, and I was doing well not smoking in the waking world. And when I woke up, I was like, hold on a minute, but I was back to being that mode of myself. I
yes,
was back to being my past self, and I took it uh, to be happening now and to be normal.
yeah, yeah,
But in the waking world, it wouldn't happen like that. I'd look at cigarettes and I'd think, no, I'm not going to touch them because if
yeah,
I touch them, I'm going to feel sick,
yeah, yeah,
right? So I'm wondering if the process of dying is something like that. It's kind of like waking up and realizing, oh, okay, I was just that doing of nature just a while ago, but now everything's just become clearer and I can be much more. I can be pure mind.
yeah.
There's a pure clarity, or some. At least that's what the NDEs seem to imply, because I've looked at so many, and there seems to be a kind of mental expansion, or people report feelings of expansion, of being able to read other people's minds, or being
Yeah.
in touch with a wider reality. It sounds like stepping out of Plato's cave,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
proverbial cave,
yeah, yeah.
everyone's inside the cave, everyone
From
sees the shadows,
shadows. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
all they know.
yeah.
And then someone steps outside the cave and they see the outside world and all the colors and they're overwhelmed. And when they go back, they struggle to describe what they've seen.
That's
So,
right. Because you see, that's again because they premise the I, and I don't. I mean, the mind. The mind is a very complex tool, and the system is occupying the mind. And after an evolution in the world of phenomenon, it sees. So it sees in such a complex way, and it's so complex. We're lost in there as well. But again, I always go back to my whole take now on life and death has to do with the thing in itself. Like I believe I'm the thing in itself talking to you, but you're the thing in itself talking to me. Okay. And when we break the conditioning, like so the ghost in the machine, I'm the ghost saying hello to the ghost. And I'm asking myself, are we in a scattered body? Are we the same thing in a scattered body? Okay, trying to
right.
realign ourselves. So the question then I'm premising is like about death. Well, we don't seem to die because we can see the continuum of the modes throughout history, how the modes have evolved and emerged through, everything has been categorizing and identifying and adding things up and unifying throughout history and combining with the correct configurations. These are all modes of the mind that let us systemize and allowed us to make spears and hunt mammoth and go to war and build nations and build the printing press. It is a whole evolution. So that whole evolutionary set of modes is aligning with itself. So I'm trying to think of death and life in relation to me being that. Okay, not
Yeah.
really like so. I how is does that wake up? Is that trying to wake up? Is it trying to emerge? What's it trying to emerge? What is the final state of emergence? You know what I mean? We're
Yeah.
emerging, but what's the final cap on it? What are we emerging into? And when we emerge fully, if there is such thing as emerging fully, well then do we just sit there and ponder the emergence of it all? Who fucking knows? My point is,
Yeah.
I don't. So even dream world is we could go into it at length for hours, and it's another story, dream world. But
Yeah.
the brain is so complex, and we're being fooled by so many things, and we've been fooled by appearances. We're fooled by the things in front of us. That
Yeah.
seems so solid,
That's
and really,
right.
it's a dream in itself. Are we hallucinating it all? Is it a
Yeah.
simulation? Hoffman asked, "Is it all? It seems to be a simulation," and so we have so many questions to ponder and so many fields to enter. But again, it is the systemic I that enters it all. It's the systemic I that entered Hoffman. It's the systemic I that enters Lakoff and Whitehead. It's the systemic I that enters all to understand and systemize and synthesize its place through an abstract lens.
Yeah.
So again, that's what we are. So I'm asking, what does life and death mean for this systemic lens that's traveling through us, driving the logos in us? What does life mean to that? Because in that complex lens, which is the one ring to rule it all, it's the one lens that enters all fields of knowledge. All fields of knowledge are being systemized through an abstract lens, so we can synthesize our positions around fixed inferences. That's how we see internally, as I said. And so, in that lens, in that abstract lens, man has no fixed predicate. So, man is not part of the abstract equation at the abstract table of metaphysics. So, therefore, it is the thing in itself saying, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
What was that? Why is it? Why has a lens of such complexity, a set of systemic modes, and there are many modes I haven't talked about yet: discernment and extrapolation, and so on. Many, many modes that make up the one set. They all work in conjunction with one another. That set is the most complex measure I can see of our species because it's the one set that's responsible for all fields of knowledge. And it's the same set that rules out that it can't identify man. Like, for example, to go back quickly to the four horsemen of the atheist apocalypse, what's Dawkins,
Yeah.
like he writes off God, but he doesn't understand what man is. He doesn't understand the mind as a set of systemic modes that rules out man. And
Yeah.
therefore, that perspective, you see, we don't need the full picture of God because we're never going to have the full picture until we have it to see God, consciousness, the eye. I don't mean God with the wings, but a conscious eye. We
Yeah.
need to have a semblance of it, a sense of structure and magnitude that might allude to that. And I say by pointing out a set of systemic modes that work in conjunction with one another, that systemize and synthesize all thought through an abstract lens, doesn't matter if it's chemistry, physical, evolution, has magnitude. It's present, it's a universal structure in all minds, or thought is flat without it. That has emerged. It's even asking what has emerged and what are we emerging into? Yeah.
Yeah.
So does that live and die? It seems to be living. What does it mean that it dies? It doesn't. It wants to continue.
Yeah.
So the next evolutionary state might be getting into the mind that it can sustain itself, that it can actually hop from one mind to another. Who
Yeah.
knows? Right now, I'm just trying to refine this.
Yeah. I don't know how people like Richard Dawkins can ignore um the will, which would be the Schopenhauerian will. There's a will, there's a force there before anything. And he would say consciousness, he acknowledges consciousness, but he says, oh, it's just a mystery. And that's that. He
Yeah,
leaves it at that. And it's not explained by evolution, obviously,
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
and
And he leaves it at that, yes. And he does
and
because he doesn't understand it. He's lost in an old paradigm. He's limited. And we have this idea because someone's a scientist that they know everything, or some of them are limited. I mean, we're all limited.
yeah.
Okay. Dawkins thinks the world of metaphysics that is the kind of hippie esoteric realm. That's not metaphysics. I mean, yeah, man, it's all one, whatever.
Yeah.
That's where he is. He's right. He writes off the God story in the Bible. A 10-year-old can write off that story. The
Yeah.
devil, magic mammoth horns. That's a 10-year-old. No points on that one, Dawkins. If he understood the system within that allows him to be Richard Dawkins and that allows him to rule out Richard Dawkins as being Richard Dawkins, that system itself alludes to something with magnitude, something that is bigger than ego. It is not part of ego. Categorization, all the modes, they engage through ego, but when they disengage, they're a set unto themselves. They are not ego. That set gives magnitude to our species in a phenomenal way. And I believe there's enough light in it. I can shed enough light on how it works through language and all the different phases of reality to say that deserves light. This thing is what we need to refine and focus. This is what we need to find. What are we? Let's refine,
Yeah.
the epistemological, ontological set that is we. Let's refine that before we sail into the darkest ocean. Because
Yeah.
we're running ahead of ourselves, and we think we really have premised we, and it's just a dysfunctional condition when it comes to abstract thought.
Yeah, no,
Gets in the
absolutely.
way. It gets in the way. It just gets in the way. And it took me a long time to decode myself, if you will, to meditate through modes and to really just to wake up and realize to break the conditioning. It took me a decade to go. I don't walk down the road like I am where limbs carry me around. But I
Yeah.
do not operate. If aliens landed and said, "What are you?" I would say, "I'm a set of systemic modes floating in an ocean of dissipating variables." And until I know more about that,
Yeah.
you see what I mean?
That's
That's
right.
and they would
That's right.
respond by going. They would respond accordingly by thinking that's an intelligent monkey.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? That's a monkey who knows where he is on a chessboard. He's not rushing ahead. He's just asking, "What the fuck am I? What am I equipped with? What's necessitated through me for thinking?" A set of
Yeah.
modes, and therefore, the modes, open an abstract window to me, and that's where we need to be to understand each other.
That's right. That's right. Because your experience isn't that you're being carried by um, unconscious forces willy-nilly, and you're just a puppet. Your experience isn't that of being a puppet. You are your own force, your own will. You feel like you've got free will, don't you? You feel like you have a goal, and that's what you're going to pursue. and
Yeah, yeah,
you don't feel like you're being dictated to by outside forces. It feels like the only thing that you can really truly be sure of is yourself, that um, experience, that consciousness, and everything else is just phenomenal, and it could be an illusion. But it seems like they try to ignore what you can be sure of, which is consciousness. They try to say it's only an illusion. We can't
yeah,
explain how that illusion comes about.
yeah,
And everything that you see outside the phenomenal world, it's actually a world that exists physically
yeah.
outside of mind. And by the way, it somehow produces minds, but we haven't figured it out yet. So it's almost like they get ahead of themselves and they proclaim to know something without any evidence whatsoever. And
That's right. They
basically,
present, they present absolutes, which is very dangerous. I have no
yeah,
absolutes. I mean, I do not know if it's God consciousness. I do know there's a set of systemic modes that we use for systemizing thought, because that seems to be the case. Because I can divulge them, I can show that we all categorize thought and add things up and combine with
yeah,
configurations. When
yeah,
things don't figure, it's because we haven't combined with the correct configuration. So we do work in that structured manner. So by going deeper and deeper into a deep dive into that headset, it starts to open up, and it allows us to ask bigger questions of it. Okay, you know what I mean? Like, to ask big, but the idea we present absolutes, there's consciousness is an illusion. That's a fucking absolute. You don't know what the brain is. Now, if it is epiphenomenalistic, say, the consciousness, okay, we still have to show how a system emerged in the brain, and it allows us to abstract and systemize all fields of thought. Because,
yeah,
Lecoq has more homework to do, basically, if he wants to show it as something that has emerged in the brain. And back to then also there's the other side of the coin. Back to Dawkins, the atheist. Like, if we're without spirit, we're meat. We are just meat packages. There's no
yeah,
meaning. There's no meaning to art. It's an empty void. It's an empty world. There's no meaning to morality. There's no meaning apart from the morality of allowing the other one to live so they can reproduce and keep going until we die out. That empty feeling. There's no meaning to art. There's no meaning to poetry. When someone throws down a poem, every line should finish, but it means nothing. There's no meaning to love. What's this sense in us to understand meaning? The will, like you said, will ourselves into understanding meaning. Will just
yeah.
doesn't just
That's right.
forward.
Yeah,
It wills us into meaning. It wills us into morality. It wills us into transcendental thought. It wills us into abstraction. It brings us to attention. It brings, it brings us our attention to things. Will is a powerful force. So, and it allows us to ask bigger questions, and so on. So, so that's spirit to me. That's spirit. And the system to me is spirit. The system is the spirit of science, the spirit to know. Science needs spirit. The spirit to go down the rabbit hole long before we had words like science. We were a species on a journey down the rabbit hole long before we were philosophizing, long before we mapped it as philosophy. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, we went down, the spirit, science is driven by the spirit to know. Philosophy is driven by the spirit to know, the will to know. Okay, these questions have to be answered. And, and if they are just emergent factors of the brain, well, fucking, it's an amazing novelty of the brain. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like, wow, did that emerge in the brain? Fabulous. A tool of that complexity. Then, it's still phenomenal that then we're looking at the brain with a system in it that wants to know itself, and it wants to know what the will is and all these things. So I give meaning to that. The meaning of that trying to align with itself. There's meaning in that. And that's the same thing that tries to extend through the core and communion and give art to it and music. Okay. There's meaning, and that's spirit. That's spirit in us. Okay.
yeah,
And without that, we're meat. And, and in that case, we've been killing our brothers and sisters, for no, because there's nothing to align with. It was all meaningless. Not that killing has meaning, but if you're killing a tyrant to bring about alignment, then there's meaning in that. So,
yeah.
I think these are empty people. I think, and also, it's a sad grey world, but we're not in a position. We don't know what man is yet, so we should stand back before we go writing off God.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah,
It,
yeah,
it, it reminds me of Nietzsche's warning about God is dead and something along the lines of we have killed him and now we're going to face the consequences. Because it seems like the concept of God is useful whether we believe in it or not. But it's something that it represents like this ideal, this perfect being that perhaps all of us should aspire to.
yeah,
Because if we don't believe in something better than what we have,
yeah,
then we just cease. We just give up on progress, and then we start valuing things which aren't ideal. We start valuing tyrants, supermen.
and vice above virtue.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, that's right. vice above virtue.
And
And
that's what, I'm sorry, that's what Thoreau said, that there's want of a man that there are so many men. It's what we aspire to be that best version of self. To be, and
yeah,
everything. Once we talk about the collective as something, let's do right by all human beings. That's a spiritual statement. Ego
yeah,
is I want to care and I want a big house. That's ego. I sold 50 million albums. That's an ego. But when you say
yeah,
I want all people, all children to be held up as the highest order, that's spirit talking. When we talk
yeah,
of communion, that's spirit talking. When we talk of
yeah,
connectivity, these are spiritual domains. That once we
yeah,
go into these transcendental thoughts, that's spirit, not man. That's above. That's why my book's
yeah,
called Man Has No Voice. All our biggest sense of self is spiritually driven. It's all connected to a spiritual sense of being and wanting to rise higher, wanting to rise out of the shadows, irrespective of our transgressions. We're a beautiful species trying to rise.
rise. Yeah, that's right.
We're trying to even do right by the psychopaths. That's how beautiful we are. And
Yes,
we don't want to chop them up. We're trying to help them and maybe fix the
yeah.
trauma someday. And you
If
know,
I remember correctly, Thoreau wrote some essays, some scathing essays against the government, against the structure. He favored uh, people having a different lifestyle, to be more in touch with nature, I think, or something along those lines. And
nature was majestic, and to tune into nature, the wealth of nature, and by tuning in, embodying, to embody the realism of nature, to experience nature as we're connected inextricably to it. There's majesty in that once you're connected. And Thoreau was always about driving that. And in the face of that, he would draw parallels with corruptions of governments, on the rich man and the lost man, and the little man, all the transgressions of man, whether they're rich or poor, and how they transgressed away from the source, the majesty of source.
yeah,
Henry Thoreau was famous for his piece on civil disobedience, which influenced Gandhi. It was the foundation of Gandhi's thinking. He was open about that. Civil disobedience. Look at the civil disobedience that Gandhi started in
right,
India.
that's right. Yeah,
Was foundational on Henry Thoreau, civil disobedience. So Thoreau was a phenomenal, it's like Kant. You can't read the philosophers. You can just move and embody them. Okay, we
yeah,
forget that you can't read Kant. You have to embody Thoreau, like you embody nature. It's an embodiment, not just like
yeah,
reading some silly book, like a sci-fi. You embody it, you move into it. It's really important to think of a book this way. It's just a person sitting down in front of me, sharing thoughts and trying to align me with certain perspectives that are already within me, and bring them out in me. You
yeah,
see, so Thoreau only brought out what was in me. Kant brought out by degree what's in me. The
yeah,
embodied self. It opened me up to me, and that's one of the things I felt like. I have been educated in isolation in my own little silo, and not
yeah,
in the academic sense. But that's helped me to see on a straight line without getting caught up in all the gnats and tangles of philosophy.
yeah,
But it's like I often sometimes think people can wax lyrical about all the great philosophers. And as an analogy, it's like you can wax lyrical about all the great kung fu masters, but that doesn't mean you're a kung fu expert. Okay.
that's right.
So to understand kung fu, you have to embody it,
Yeah,
structure and function. You have to, same with philosophy. So I realized one day, even reading Kant, but what's my embodiment of it? I'm reading the Bruce Lee master, but I want to do the kung fu. So I went looking for me. Once I had enough kung fu moves to understand the frame, I went, okay, that's enough. I understand Husserl and Heidegger, and I understand, Spinoza. I understand all the phenomenal ideas best I can. But I still want to know them all in me. So I start to embody the kung fu and
yeah,
refine in the phenomenological sense my own kung fu moves. And that's why I arrived at a system.
yeah,
Disengaging and letting it all go. There was too many knots. I said, right. So we forget that sometimes. I know people out there who've read 100 philosophical books and know it off by heart, but they don't even have politeness.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck have you embodied here? You're just waxing lyrical, but you have to embody. That's what I mean. We abstract, so I embody that we abstract. I don't just let that thought go. It's not just a throwaway cool thought for me. I use categorization. I can add up. Adding is not just adding money. I have the mode to add up evolutionary tracks. I have the mode to combine with the configurations, to combine with the correct
that's
configuration.
beautiful.
Yeah, I don't just
Like
throw.
Spinoza, you are your own thinker. Yeah,
I'm my own thinker. Yeah, absolutely. So my point is, I'm my own thinker. To find if it's in me, it's in you. That's phenomenology. You know what I mean? You categorize, I categorize. You add, I add. You use configuration and combination. I do too. You
yeah,
extend and expand. You use scope and scale. You use reductionism. You use all the same modes as me. You use identification and unification. 1 + 1 = 2. You unify that. You identify the cell. You're trying to identify reality. You and
yeah,
I, and if we said all of this in Russian or Chinese, we would be alluding to the same set of modes. They categorize, they add. These are the
yeah.
basic functions.
We're all using the same tools in a way,
They
aren't we?
all allow for the embodiment of language. Without the system, language is flat. We're adding things up as we speak. We're moving through category after category. It's all going on subconsciously around the
Yeah.
system, which lets us communicate and place our words as references so we can infer them and find structure in them. That's what's going on. So we're seeing each other's eyes and what we're trying to align with.
I see.
You know what I mean? So my point is, I don't just light. I give light to this. I give light. God, I embody this. I don't. This is my kung fu apparatus. I categorize and I add, and these are my kung fu. This is the apparatus, and I take it seriously. I sit into myself in meditation. I meditate through modes, and I allow myself to move into all fields of thought and see. So I'm trying to refine that. I'm trying to refine it and understand it more and more before I drop off this planet and hold on to myself if I can in the next realm. The turtle, the ocean. Who fucking knows?
No, you're embodying your experience and your intellect, and you're trying to understand what's going on, and that's beautiful because it helps you to navigate the world, and it helps you to be an individual in the world and to
Yeah,
be original in a way, to be
yeah,
you.
yeah,
There's nobody else like you in the world, really.
yeah. But to be the ghost and to be like as philosophers too, what are we trying to do as philosophers, as scientists? We're trying to catch up on ourselves. One time we believed when the crop failed, the demons had poisoned the land, and we knew now we know it's all hocus pocus. So in that respect, we've caught up on ourselves. Even in medicine, we're trying to catch up on ourselves. One time we put slugs on our faces to absorb blood. Now we caught up on ourselves. So we're trying to catch up on ourselves in that respect. We're always trying to catch up on ourselves. So as philosophers, our job is to set down premises for people to think with, to allow them to catch up on ourselves. And if we're only one one entity permeating all heads, all the different heads, well, then we are on a teleological journey of trying to catch up on ourselves and become that one core,
Yeah,
that one systemic I. So it is beholden on us as philosophies too, as kung fu experts, to orchestrate people around how things are. It's not just this is who I am. My philosophy is driven by universals like this is who we are.
yeah,
I've taken on board many structures of the great philosophers. I've aligned with them because they were my aligned way of being. And
yeah,
therefore, we're trying to put a puzzle together for humanity that we all align with. And there's no oppression in it. There's no anything. You become fully what you are. You emerge at what you are. And it gives you a broader, more majestic sense of self and a more valuable life. And you can add to the canon of knowledge as we move forward. That's
yeah.
wonderful. Yeah.
I think we do ourselves a favor if we became more humble, if we practiced humility instead of always being so sure of ourselves and our world views, and then we clash and we disagree, and
Yeah.
it brings me to the point of economic systems and ways of living. What, in your view, I know they're probably both flawed, or maybe the idealization of economic systems. Uh, can't quite be actualized because we ourselves are imperfect. Maybe it's one or the other. Either we're too imperfect to manifest these ideas in the world, or the ideas themselves are initially imperfect because of the way we've been thinking about ourselves and how we relate to one another. But um, in your honest opinion, never mind how these ideas manifested in the world. In your honest opinion, what's better for mankind? And perhaps both of them haven't been properly tested, these ideas, but what's best for mankind? Would you say capitalism or socialism? Would you say Adam Smith or Karl Marx? Or perhaps both of them are bad examples. I don't know.
Yeah, I rather than more if I had to pick one because I don't like labels, it would be socialism. Okay,
Yeah,
rather I get why people justify capitalism and all that without going into it, but to hold capital, to hold all the apple trees and then give me the odd apple, I just don't buy into that. Thoreau was anti that right down the board and for majestic
right.
reasons. But what are
And
we trying to?
anti-competition.
Yeah, what are we trying to actualize? What are we actualizing around? Well, we have to what are we trying to build our models around? Well, right now we're a scattered head. We're lost in scattered ideological hats, and there's so much division. Yet at the core, we're all the same. So we're not fully actualized around what we are. The economists are like a great way of thinking of the world of economy is where I love that story in the Bible, like of the House of Babel. And the idea that we lost source with God in the Nietzschean, we turned off the light of God. And we're trying to build, man can build the material world. Man is God, right? And so on. Now that you can, my point being is you can see that present everywhere on Wall Street. People are cutting up rainforests because they're not connected to source
Yeah.
on the wrong mountain. And if you're connected to source and spirit, you're connected to something of magnitude is attached to a gigantic legacy. And when you actualize around that, you see reality differently. So we have to ask our questions. Any politician or oligarch or anything, or you or me coming to the table, how do you see me and what do you want out of it? They're defined. So you and I are on an island with 10,000 people and you come up with an idea. So I want to know, how do you see me and my kid and what do you want out of it? Now, if you tell me you have to cut down the rainforest on the island to make your palace, well, I'd say you don't see me or my kid because we need that rainforest, okay?
That's
And then
right.
I ask, what do you want out of it? And you say, well, a mansion with 50 bedrooms. And I say, well, that's a false heuristic of what wealth is. So you're dysfunctional by definition. You're dysfunctional, so you shouldn't be at the table with ideas. So it's not about the bridge building idea or how do we transport goods. It's about the mind that comes to the table with the idea. Now,
Yeah.
for example, we have people who have come to the table. I spoke to Matt about legacy. You and I are attached to a legacy of war, of people dying and sacrifice, of alphabets, of language, of printing press, of books being translated, of science, of knowledge, of just, it's unfucking imaginable of what we have suffered and went through to arrive at where we are on this day. And if I want to put out a product, that product is attached to all of that. Alphabets, trucks don't move without alphabets, and engineers. You know what I mean? Engineers, people dying in trenches. And the idea I would stand away from that and say, I want all the cake. There's an audacity in that of arrogance and misalignment. Now, my point being is, we cannot create a clear economic order because the man himself is not set up the right way to think. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
dysfunctional. We have to grow out of this phase. So while we're in this network of madness, this amorphous network, you know, it's going to be very hard to put an economic in order that serves all and there's not greedy players undermining it all because we are the way we are. We're like a schizophrenic mess at the moment.
Yeah.
But we will actualize ourselves around the correct state someday. And we will see each other and we will laugh at the day that man concerned themselves with fast cars and posh watches and posh shoes and mansions, and we'll see as pitiful. And we'll
Yeah.
see that the chandelier is not our wealth, but the moon is my chandelier. And we'll see into each other, and we'll see a species rising out of the darkness. That's our legacy, and we'll hold wealth by that and humble ourselves to it. And when we're
Yeah.
ready, when you're ready to bring that to the table as a man and a woman, you're ready for the game. And until such time, you're dysfunctional.
That's right.
Yeah. So the answers are not on the table today. They're in the, it's a transitional answer. It's going to take time and it'll fall into place then,
That's right.
the right order of how we do right by one another and ideas. Okay, this will cost us this many minerals and this much labor, but we all have a say and we're all respected. And we're like, hey, let's cut down that mountain because that guy's idea to build an incubator is a great fucking idea. And
Yeah.
your profit is the children you save. And if you cannot arrive at that, I'm a very, very fucking wealthy man, and I'm not jealous because I'm not a billionaire. I find that to be pitiful. I chase the wealth of philosophy. I'm blessed, but it really is. And you know, a TP impresses me, not fast cars and mansions. I find that to be a little boy's dream. And so
Yeah.
when you're ready to come to the table as a big player, I'm ready for you, and I'm happy to brag up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when you're ready to come to the table as an open player for all human beings, and what can I do for humanity
That's
to
right.
serve?
Yeah. As a whole. Yeah.
Because humanity has fed me a legacy. I've never,
Yeah.
in my belly's full, not just apples and apple pie. Humanity, nature has fed me a legacy of wealth, and I surrender and humble myself to it, or else I'm nothing. That's spirit, you
Yeah.
know. You
It
know.
feels like today we're in a Tower of Babel scenario more than ever because
Yes, we are.
it's like we're speaking the same language, but at the same time we have our own definitions of the words and we have our own concepts and you know and it's what they tend to describe as a post-truth era where you know I have my truth, you have your truth. What's true to you is true to you, and vice versa. And there's no real truth out there other than what we decide. And it's just absolute chaos. It's, you know, there's no unity. There's no, we
Yeah,
know, we don't agree upon any one concept. It's just how can we unite ourselves
yeah,
if we even disagree about the very words that we use, the very words that the same words that we're using, the same language, we're meaning different things. And then even we lie about the contexts. And even if it happens to be the same context that we're talking about, it's still the same, it's still the wrong meaning or I'm using it in this way, or and we always tend to assume, at least it seems to be the case, the mentality of today. People always tend to primarily assume that the other person is ill-intentioned, that there's malice behind it. Oh, are you offending me right now? What are you saying? Why have you said that?
Yeah.
When the initial intention isn't even to offend or to make someone feel bad about themselves. It's just they're just trying to express themselves, but straight away, it's like we got to a point where, the Overton window has shifted so much. What was once acceptable is now seen as offensive, even if people don't mean to offend. The people from the older generation, they're still using the same words because they're so used to those words and they don't mean anything by them, but straight away.
Yeah.
It's almost like the new generation is saying, no, you're wrong. Everything that you came up with in your time, it's all wrong. You're a dinosaur. Stop using those words. You sound bad. You're a bigot. There's so much of that going on today. And I just feel like, why don't you try to get to know the person first and what they meant by it instead
You
of
think
just,
I am?
is that okay? Yeah.
I was,
There
I
seems
was,
to be a
I was
bit of
losing you there.
interference. Yeah.
I did hear you all. It was a bit broken.
Oh,
Yes.
brilliant. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's so many avenues to go down on that because it's a very broad spectrum of what you said. And I agree, but we should also be careful not to measure the world through the internet lens because, that has given platforms to lots of narcissistic thinking and half measure hats and people who have half, confabulations, half ideas about the world. And so let's, first of all, philosophically speaking, I mean, truth, we're not post-truth because we've never arrived at truth yet. There's been certain fundamental truths about how we live and,
That's right. Yeah.
male, female, and certain truths, you know what I mean? Like, and,
Bingo, bingo, bingo.
we all need water. We all need heat if we're cold. All of those variables are fundamental. And there's
It's a
truth.
misnomer, isn't it? Post-truth. It's
Post-truth
like we
is
haven't even arrived at
we
the
haven't
truth,
arrived
the
now.
one truth. We don't even understand the world,
Yeah,
uh, you know, in a perfect way. If there is if we as human beings are even capable of
but,
understanding everything perfectly, and people are already saying it's a post-truth world, but yeah,
but
but
therefore,
there
but therefore,
definitely seems to be more misunderstanding today than ever before. It's people are divided, more divided, it seems. Or maybe they were already divided and it just found expression on social media. Maybe it's
that's right.
augmented, yeah.
At the same time, as a unified front, we'd say, look at Palestine, the world. I've never seen it in my lifetime more united. Like we're stop killing fucking women and children and men. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? We're united. There's a fire in our bellies around the whole globe, and the majority are united. Everywhere I go, everywhere we look, it's like, wow, look through the window of the world. We are beautiful. We're all saying, like, we might have our differences, but at the core, communion, we don't kill children because we do.
Yeah.
What does that say about us? Everything is dead in that hat. But again, back to the point, back to the analogy about the fish on the beach, the disoriented fish. They all have a say. They all have a say on the internet. They all have a say, and we all have half ideas as philosophers. But what does it say? You and I know that we need to debate truth at a much deeper level, and we need to. It has to be debate, and like morality in relation to into ontology and phenomenology. We're at the talk and wax lyrical like this, and we're doing our best to understand ourselves. That means we're trying to put the picture together for our species. Science and philosophers, we're trying to put the correct picture together. That's why we have words like ontology, so we can find the ontological correct fundamentals of ontology so we can align and hold accord by them. That seems to be the case, meaning we're on a journey. And on this day, unfortunately, we're not a very advanced species. We have a few tools and complex computers, and AI is a complex tool, a great measure of human minds. But, our computers cannot do they cannot abstract the whole spectrum of reality and run along all the inferences and pull out different topological sets to work with. Computers don't do that, we do that. That's what allowed us to build AI. But my point being is we're a phenomenal species. There's a subset in us, a bunch of little mad nerds, and we're all doing our best to think about morality and the deepest sense of everything and truth. And those ideas will permeate. We have to think of our knowledge sets in relation to sort of, I think of it always as permutations, permeating, permutations, cross-pollinating variables over millennia. over millennia. And here we are on this day. And what the people don't realize is they don't know what the philosophers give them. But, today you'll hear young people using words like dimension, ontologies out there now, axiom, matrix, there's different words. That's all permeated the culture because of philosophers, those who went deeper and put this language together to get away from your normal, everyday, conventional language. So we have words like a priori and presupposition. And all those words eventually permeate the narrative. Evolution is in the narrative, like I said, dimension and quantum. And these are kind of now every day in in language, but the public don't understand them. They're sort of floating along, and they get little buzzes off them, and some of them do a little bit of research and reading, and then it's all by degree. People know more than others, but nobody fucking knows. There's just a bunch of people trying to put together, a bunch of nerds behind closed doors putting alphabets together. Mathematical model, creating all these fields of understanding, and we're standing on the back of giants. You and I, we're standing on the back of giants, and unfortunately, we're surrounded by people of worth in every way, sovereign and beautiful and real and equal to all of us, but they're not a thinking head. And hopefully someday it'll be, will be all a thinking head. But right now they're not a thinking head.
Yeah. No,
so we have to make allowances for that. Do you know what I mean? The people giving me your opinion on truth. I couldn't give a fuck about your opinion on truth. It just doesn't. It's not engaging. It's like, all right, cool. As you know, it's like you've got one punch to throw. You're not a kung fu master. I go to the kung fu masters. I want to know how to embody the field.
Yeah.
And the complexity of it all. Like I said, we have to surrender to it and realize we're on a journey. And I believe, we're a monkey with an alphabet. There's a journey in that of permutations, permeating permutations. We're a fish with books. We're two fish having a conversation about abstraction. There's a fucking journey in that. And the one line trying to find ourselves, and it seems to be a journey inwards. Through the physical, it seems to be going from A to Z, like a linear journey outwards. But the mind has evolved to come up for air, now go back down into itself. That's our journey. And we, the privileged few, because we are privileged to see the reality in a kind of through a broader lens, even though we're still primitive, but still privileged. And we're trying to put it together for people, and we're all doing our best. And whether we're right or wrong, we all have one goal: to unite and to know and to find meaning.
And that's right. And if we care about human progress, we have to be prepared to accept that some things that people came up with in the past, in previous generations, are useful and we can build upon them. But if we're too rebellious, and yes, there are some things in the past which weren't appropriate, weren't conducive to prosperity, and yes, maybe the youngsters of today are right to rebel against that and in the name of progress. But if you just out of anger write everything off, then you destroy the very notion of standing on the shoulders of giants, just like you said. And I think we need to preserve that concept, that picture of people standing on the shoulders of giants, because if we hold on to that, then we can, it's like a concatenation of progress into the future. And if we're going to progress and ameliorate our lives, we have to be prepared to say, some things in the past ought to be preserved, and we shouldn't just, just because we're angry about, say, like progressives are angry about conservatives, and they say, oh, they were just wrong about everything. Let's start from scratch. Let's reinvent everything. Let's even change the create the Tower of Babel, reinvent the meaning of every word and every concept. Let's change absolutely everything. Let's reinvent ourselves. We are our own gods. We can do anything we want. There's a danger, because if you just destroy everything to reinvent yourself, there's a danger that you have gone back to a primordial stage in the human evolution where you've just, you feel lost.
It's nihilism.
And all the knowledge that has been accumulated by our species has been written off. Everything that came before, all those steps that were made. You
can't write it off if you embody it. If you learn Kung Fu, you can't just write it off. So they're not embodied beings. They're embodied in a material world. They're embodied in a superficial lollipop lipstick world for most people. Young people, in all fairness to them, there's lots of bright young people and they have great energy, but they've lost sight. There's no elder to guide them, to guide that young energy. And we're in a world that has a lot of corruption, and we can see it 24/7. So it is giving rise to anger and indignation, and people bouncing off each other. It's happening. Our species is buzzing at the moment. But at the same time, we still have to rein it all in and understand it. At the
Yeah,
end of the
yeah,
day,
that's right. Yeah,
we always, sometimes I'm angry and I just want to take Netanyahu and just hang him, and I express it. And I'm not afraid to express it. Hang the fucker. At the same time, you rein it in. We're humans that got lost along the way. And if we're attached to legacy, to go back to that point, yes, people are trying to undo wrongs, right wrongs again, and tear down the statue of that slave owner and so on. But
yeah,
if you look at all the permutations throughout our evolution, just from chimp, 7 million years, say, when we split, whatever, just the legacy that we're attached to. I'm not interested in little variables on the ladder, of
yeah,
development.
yeah,
I'm not even interested in the Roman Empire. It can be a novelty to think with it sometimes. Or that World War II was just an abomination, a dysfunctionality of the ladder of the evolutionary development
yeah.
channel.
That's
And
right.
my history is not a little moment about Napoleon or Nelson or the Irish history or the famine. Even though all of these things, there was transgressions and horrible pains and suffering and things
Yeah,
that needed light and accountability. But when you measure the whole thing, allow for this is what evolution. This is the cost of an evolving monkey head.
yeah,
This is the cost of trying to grow into our understanding, to ground an ontology, to arrive at a
yeah,
symmetrical language that allows us to speak it up in the correct manner. This is the cost. And I don't know how to pick out a variable and go, let's change that. So you have to think and forgive it. If
yeah.
you think with a monkey rising out of the darkness, then you forgive it.
That's
If
right.
you,
Yeah,
if you think of it in vacuums, the white man chopped up the black man and enslaved the black man, well, you can't forgive it if you stay in that vacuum because there's so much anger and indignation attached to it and so much suffering and oppression, and rightly so. I'm not writing
yeah.
it off and saying it wasn't serious, but if you're attached to that. But if you let go and attach to the journey, you forgive it. It's developmental phases.
That's right.
Yeah, you
That's
see,
right.
and that's where we are. That's the abstract window, and that's spirit forgiving it. That's
Yeah,
spirit forgiving an evolution.
yeah.
Yeah, just
And there's something else.
yeah.
If people just decide to erase all the horrible histories and tear down the statues of men that were very unpleasant and homicidal, mass murderers,
Yeah, yeah.
then the future generations won't know how that could happen because there's always a potential for that to re-emerge. There's always
Not, not
those
if we're aligned.
tendencies. Yeah,
Not if we are becoming more complex. We have alphabets now. We didn't have them 10,000 years ago. We are moving into metaphysical realms. School someday in the future will be taught with abstraction and through systems, and kids will be
yeah,
brighter, will be aligned, and our species will represent. There won't be as much suffering and poverty, which the
yeah,
environment creates. And so we have a long journey to go. We have a long journey. And once we're aligned,
definitely.
once we embody music, we don't play in discordant notes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And we should look back and try to learn from our mistakes rather
Yeah,
than just saying, oh, let's not publish
yeah, yeah.
story, the narrative, let's not have this because it might be too offensive for people. They can't take it. They assume from the get-go they can't take that. They'll be too offended, hide it, don't write about it.
Because they're
And the
not
thing,
giants. Giants are not offended. They're dwarfs. For so long, we've been the dwarfs raising giants. We've been dwarfed by, but now we're giants coming back to the table. That's none of that's going to buckle me. You can say what you want about Ireland. None of it's, even if you have a prejudice and a bias, I go, why do you think that? I'll ask you politely, why do you think that? And I think you're wrong about that. That's it. And I won't love you any less as a human being. Unless there's persistent patterns of hate towards the Irish. And then I'll think that person's dysfunctional.
yeah,
And then I'll put them on the evolutionary ladder and say another lost turtle. But there's forgiveness for it all. Now, it doesn't mean we can't hold certain individuals like Netanyahu or Hitler's accountable in the moment because they're damaging the species. But in terms of looking through the historical lens, you can't tear down the statue, which gives us stature, which is our legacy. That's
yeah,
the statue, okay? And all statues, in terms of stone statues, disappear anyway. Whether we take them down or not, they're dust, okay? They all got the Buddhist taught us that, They're all just, so what are we worried about? Let them blow away with the wind. And what we remember, it doesn't matter. We remember the Ying dynasties of China. It doesn't matter. We remember aspects of Roman empires. What we know is man was trying to rise out of the dark. And
yeah,
along the way, there was dysfunctionality and functionality. Each field through fields of tension, permeating and permutations of it all. And
right.
in that, and here we are arriving, like I said, in two fish now going, fuck, what was all of that? And trying to have a conversation that makes sense
Yeah,
and our
yeah,
place in it. Now, when you stand up in that, if you embody it, you stand up in it. And so this is my mansion that I stand up in. Rich oligarchs stand up in a stone mansion. I stand up in a transcendental legacy, a
yeah,
mansion of magnitude. Now, when you come to the table with that embodied, it's very hard to topple you. So all conversations are welcome on the table. All books are welcome. All ideas are welcome. And we debunk them accordingly with politeness. And we
yeah,
move forward. And we have to make allowances for those who only see through a half a lens.
So there is a danger, based on what you said, there is a danger that if we focus too much on past events in order to prevent something bad from happening, we could become too paranoid, and then we might misconstrue certain present events as signs that the bad thing in the past is about to happen, when it isn't the case necessarily. So we ought to find kind of like a balance. We could look at our history and say, okay, those bad things did happen. We know they can happen. We don't have to examine the details necessarily. We don't have to go too much in depth, lest we become paranoid about the present. We're too paranoid. We're trying to avoid it. Why not just? Would you say we should just relax, bear history in mind, but just relax, still learn from our mistakes, and just try to mitigate suffering in the world or something like that?
As mitigate suffering and also come to know so we can rise out of it and catch up on ourselves. You know what I mean? We got to keep aligning, keep moving forward. And the thing about history, people say history keeps repeating itself. I love that history repeats itself. Autumn repeats itself. You know what I mean? Summer repeats itself.
Right.
The bees pollinating repeat themselves. Thank God history repeats itself. What we mean is the dysfunctional
I
side of
never
our.
thought about it that way,
So,
actually.
so we need to isolate what we mean by when we say history keeps repeating itself. What we mean is the dysfunctional side of our nature, which causes great harm for some of us, for other sovereign beings, keeps repeating itself. And when we look into why it keeps repeating itself, we see that there's schizophrenic frameworks in there, people thinking with schizophrenic models of what the universe is, people thinking with trauma, and people thinking with Machiavellian ideas, as we spoke about earlier on, disturbed individuals, and then individuals who mean well, but they've only got half ideas of what the world they're in. The world is more of a sensorial feel to them, how things feel to them all the time. That makes me
Yeah.
feel bad. That makes me feel good. I like that person. I don't like that. And their reality is kind of an embodiment of that. And they very rarely, even their spiritual idea is just a feeling, but they don't really do deep dives into metaphysics. They just don't. So they're
Yeah.
turtles on the beach. Yeah, and we're all stuck with the reality the way it is. There's nothing we can do. But the more we start to come to understand even history and how we look at it, the more we can educate, the more we understand the legacy we are, the more we can stand up in it. The more we don't teach this in school to give magnitude, to turn young people. I'm going to turn you on to giants of magnitude. Do you know what I mean? That's why I tell my son, you're going to be turned into a giant of transcendental magnitude. I'm going to put Henry Thoreaux into you as well as all the other philosophers and your dad. And my point is,
Yeah.
when we learn to stand, so we're a very, I think of it, we're in an embryonic state of development. God, the conscious eye, is in an embryonic state of development. It's not a finished
Yeah.
product. God is an embryonic state. God is coming back to light, and it's losing its way in many of the brains because they're fucking lost and scattered in a hard world, facing hard storms. And you can imagine all the permutations of those storms and how they've affected us through trauma, through emotion, through spirit
Yeah.
work. And
It's
here we are.
definitely a rich, very rich reality, experientially rich, that's for sure. The
Yes,
world.
and therefore we have to deal with that richness, and that richness sometimes impoverishes us because it's a crooked richness, if you know what I mean. But so that's just
Yeah.
how it is. So we have to continue to align with as philosophers. We've got to keep writing in the truth for the people and keep pushing the books and pushing the ideas and understanding, as Thoreau said, we're on a track, moving forward. The logos, the pushing forward, pushing, pulsating, wanting to push forward into something better and to know. And we have to make allowances for those who are falling apart around us and
Yeah.
understand we don't know as philosophers. So, what hope do the people have?
Yeah.
You know,
It just goes to show that life is very much like music, even the course of human history. You get repetitions, sometimes you get a bit of a lead solo, a flutter, it looks like confusion, but it evokes some kind of meaning, and then we're back to the repetition, and then there's more order, and it's like structured, and at the
yeah,
same time it flirts with chaos.
that's right.
There's rebellion,
Yeah, yeah,
there's conformity.
yeah.
It's beautiful. It's all a play. Sometimes it just feels
Not a
like
play.
life is a circus.
Yeah, yeah, it's a play. And
Yeah.
it's all in play, and it's all
Yeah.
in play. And it's beautiful.
When I first took magic mushrooms, um, I've said this to Matt before, and actually the guy who gave me magic mushrooms, it was a blind guy called Matt, and we used to call him Blind Man Matt, and he was doing music at uni. Funnily enough, it's almost like a synchronicity. And when he gave me the mushrooms, it took about 20 minutes to take effect, and I got all the visuals. I saw many wonderful things, many interesting distortions. I saw
Yeah,
a statue move and wink at me, and it
yeah,
was
yeah,
crazy. But there was a moment within the trip. So imagine you're tripping normally on magic mushrooms, and you see all the patterns, and you have a, it's not just visual, but you feel spiritual, and you're talking to your friends, and you're in a good mood. I had a good trip. But then within the trip, I suddenly, there was a moment which was different, was quite different. It was like a mode, like it changed, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I felt really expanded. It's almost like the entire world just rested on my neck. And I was looking at the trees, and the trees, it resembled giant broccoli. And I was looking at everything, just the scenery, the three-dimensionality of this phenomenal world. And all of a sudden, I had like an epiphany, a kind of feeling that I knew something, I remembered something, but I didn't quite know how to explain it. It's almost like I remembered something. And then all of a sudden I became euphoric because the world was felt like a circus that I had created for my own amusement. And I literally started laughing. I was like, ha 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 ha. And it was like everything was just me. I created everything. And then all of a sudden and bearing in mind at the time I was a materialist. And when I came back to tripping normally, so my default mode within the trip was just coming back to myself and just getting the visuals, and knowing I'm me and interacting with people. And within the trip, I looked back at that moment and I thought, what the fuck was that? It's like I remembered something. And I wasn't me. I wasn't Arlindo. I wasn't a
yeah,
human being. I was just this
yeah,
expanded mind. And back then, I was a physicalist, but I wasn't a dogmatic physicalist. I wasn't, trying to preserve physicalism at all costs.
yeah, yeah,
There was a niggling doubt, especially about consciousness and the mind. I
yeah,
still thought, but how is it that materials, that dead matter, can create consciousness and mental experiences? And I had that niggling doubt, and I often wondered, as a physicalist, could there be more? Could it be that we have it wrong about reality? And there were seeds of doubt, and as I accumulated more experience throughout my late teens, and going into adulthood, and having more, accumulating more and more experience, and examining and going back at my previous experiences, and trying to perhaps reframe them, or reinterpret them, thinking to myself, maybe um, you know what I thought happened didn't quite happen that way, or had a different nature. Like, for example, I don't consider myself to have had an NDE before, but I had something like it because I was taking a lot of drugs at university, right? And one day I went on a drug binge, and then I passed out, and then I woke up the next morning. I was feeling frail, and instead of getting something to eat, I decided to go to the pub on campus. It was called the Undercroft pub at Harrow campus, actually. So I decided to go there, and I was feeling frail, but I thought I'll just have another drink, hair up the dog, with my mates, talking at the pub on campus. And then I decided to use the toilet. So on the way to the toilet is just outside the pub. The pub is inside the campus, and the toilet is outside the pub, right? So I went to the toilet, and as I walked, there were several tables, several people, and I went to the toilet, and I stood in front of the urinal, and then all of a sudden I passed out, right? And you know when you get that feeling of oblivion,
yes,
but you're still aware. There's still an awareness.
yeah,
And then all of a sudden, I found myself, and this is going to sound funny, right? It always sounds funny to whoever I tell it to. I felt like I was on a cloud, and the cloud was surrounded by a misty atmosphere, but I felt really peaceful. And you know what they say about, there's a tunnel, there's spirit guides. I saw none of that, but
Yeah.
I was in this realm of peace. I was so peaceful, but all of a sudden I had a curiosity. I thought, what is this? What's happened? And then suddenly I remembered, oh yeah, I passed out. And as soon as I thought that, I was back in the pub, not the toilet, but in the pub. And my experience was of hovering above people's heads. And if you imagine what a pub looks like, the inside of a pub, imagine that, but the colors were richer. Like there was a hyper reality about it, right? And I was hovering above the heads, and as I hovered above the heads, that I didn't have a thought of I'm Arlindo. It was just like an awareness. Imagine an awareness,
Yeah.
just moving, and it was moving through frames of space, like gradually. It wasn't like a a flowing movement. It was like moving through frames of space. And when I looked down, I could see people's heads, and I could hear people talking, and at the same time, I could feel their emotions. It's hard to describe, but I felt how they were trying to impress one another as they spoke. Like they were trying to impress, like there
Right.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
something like a unity trying to, oh yeah, look at me, look at me, look at me, like that. And I was feeling that, and it was really weird. And then all of a sudden, I'm back in my body. I feel myself lying down, and my head is on this bloke's lap, and he's slapping my face and he's going, "Oh, wake up, wake up!" And I was like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And he's splashing water on me and slapping me, and I was like, "Oh, okay, stop, stop, I'm okay, I'm okay." So he helped me up, and I was feeling frail, but I had no medical assistance, and there's actually a hospital next to the campus, right? No doctors checked me, but the bloke, and then the bloke took me back to the pub, and my friends came up to him, and he goes, "Oh, you should have seen him. He looked pale. He looked dead, right?" Now, so when I told this story to someone, they said to me, "Oh, you probably passed out from vasovagal syncope. You were dehydrated.
Okay.
You hadn't eaten, and but obviously that doesn't quite explain my experience." Now, I was a materialist at the time, and materialism was in vogue at universities. Like kids were very much scientifically minded, materialists. And I kept the experience to myself because I thought if I tell my friends this, it's just going to sound, they're going to think I'm crazy, right? But I was trying to figure out in my head what exactly took place. I thought, is it that on my way to the toilet, I walked past people? I wasn't necessarily paying attention to them, but my subconscious absorbed all the information. Uh, it stayed there, and when I collapsed, I had the illusion of being outside of my body and the illusion of hovering above people's heads, and somehow all that subconscious information constructed a very elaborate hallucination. Because as I looked around the pub, the people that I saw in my experience appeared to match what I had seen in the out of body experience. So it seemed like it was confirming to me that perhaps there was something real about the experience. So
Yeah.
again, the niggling doubt.
Is that what triggered your journey away from being a materialist into idealism, if you will?
Yeah, it's one of these
That
experiences that
was
I looked
yeah,
back and I thought, well, perhaps I really was in some sense
yeah.
hovering above people's heads, and I was inside some construct which was created by a communion of minds. And um, I can't really describe it other than, having these tentative explanations
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the experience, really.
I,
Um,
I, I can relate. I can relate. I can't speak to having an out of body experience like that. Obviously, I've taken my shrooms and through meditation, I've disconnected from everything. But as I
yeah,
said, we're waking up as a species. We don't understand dream world. We don't understand the complexity of the brain. We don't
yeah,
understand our problem. We don't understand what's going on inside the brain. In the most complex way. And
yeah,
maybe it's something we'll all be capable of in the future, an out of body experience. Maybe that's where we're heading, to completely leave the body and enter a metaphysical realm. I don't know. But just to speak to, you said when you were taking the shrooms and you just found yourself disappearing in a cloud and seeing, the trees became, what was it, broccoli, and
like giant broccoli. Yeah,
yeah, it was almost like a solipsistic trip. You became this solipsistic entity, which is your
that's right.
universe.
Yeah, yeah,
I often think, when I've tripped, it's are we recognizing the system that is within, the system that is connected to the entirety of the legacy? Because it can abstract and speak of it. If it can speak of it, it has to embody it. Therefore, it is
yeah,
connected to it. And if you and I can speak of the last 7 million years and further back and think with it all, we don't have to think with every variable, but we think with enough to give it traction within and say it's worth putting a lens on.
yeah,
Therefore, we can. That's how complex we are. So my point is, do we sit back into the system and let the body and ego go when we're tripping, and we suddenly get flashes, and it just flashes of the system and how it moves through reality. And these are the
yeah.
beginning baby flashes of it. Like little babies waking up to the light and sound for the very first time out of the womb, and
Right.
we're
Yeah,
getting little flashes of it. You know what I mean? Like are we entering new realms, and maybe they'll look back in 10 million years' time and say early man believed the dream world, it was metaphysical. It was actually their brain starting to wake up in the metaphysical realm,
yeah,
that they used to think it was dream world because brains weren't evolved enough. I don't know. I'm just projecting forward. My point is, we don't know. So we have so many experiences that humans have had, and that we all have to contend with and make sense of, and
yeah,
so that's part of being down the rabbit hole. But it was
yeah.
an interesting
Well,
story, and it was an interesting, like I said, it changed your journey, and deep revelations change our journeys.
yeah,
Life is
and,
just,
and it was a gradual thing for me, because at the time it made me think deeply about what Carl Sagan said, like we are the universe seeing through human eyes, or something like, he said
yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And I thought, from that mushroom experience, and like feeling like the whole world is on your neck, and
yeah,
everything is my own creation.
yeah,
I felt like a god, like some kind of deity. And then I was back to being myself, and it's like, oh, it's like I remembered something. What's
yeah,
going on there? It felt like not nostalgic, like something that I knew but forgot, but then remembered but couldn't quite explain it,
yeah,
and then just put it down to, oh, maybe it's just chemicals. Maybe it's just it just made me feel like that. Gave me some kind of delusion. But
yeah,
I dismissed it initially as a delusion, but I still had some niggling doubts. It's like,
yeah,
come on, it's showing me something, surely,
yeah.
and
The niggling doubts are important, or else we're in a bed of absolutes. Without, it's either absolutes or niggling doubts. That's what niggling doubts
yeah,
try to form. They're
uh,
essential for all fields. Niggling doubts.
yeah,
It's what. But just to, even to go back to the system. But if we abstract ourselves, that appearances are not what things are. Like this is an hallucination itself, this reality. So
yeah,
appearances are definitely not what things are. So even light, we're not really seeing the world. So if we abstract the self, yeah, into the purest sense of authentic self, the system, as far as I'm concerned, we are literally an eye that has a set of modes that is sitting in an ocean that is vast to the ends of the universe. That, like, from a solipsistic point of view, I'm literally down somewhere in a quantum field, in a metaphysical quantum field, if you will, because I don't know how else to describe it. So I'm down
yeah,
there somewhere. Do I begin at Planck's constant? I don't even know what that means, but you know what I mean? Like, where do I begin down there? And
yeah,
my eyes are closed, so I'm not seeing, and there's no space between things, okay? So, and not the way we think of space anyway. But the point
yeah,
is, so is it just me with an abstract lens trying to unite with other fish, systemic fish, if you will, systemic sperm, in an abstract ocean, dancing molecules and atoms and so on? And that's where I am. I mean, that's where I am. That's trippy in itself. And when
yeah,
the brain disengages in mushrooms, it's still kind of in ego and in the brain, so it sees flashing colors and impressions of the world we're so conditioned to think with. But if we, through deep meditation, if I just sit in the pond on the inside, and I accept through the abstract window that appearances are not what things are. The ear doesn't come into it. The mouth and eyes don't come into it. Scent doesn't, touch doesn't come into it. The
Yeah.
body doesn't come into it. Therefore, I always say I'm a set of systemic modes sitting, suspended, if you will, in an ocean of dissipating variables, excited molecules, the molecules dancing and disappearing. And I
Yeah.
can't see, but I can't see. So that itself is a trippy place to be,
Yeah.
because that's where we are. And so we are, if we stripped away all the senses right now, and you and I were just we're in a darkness trying to communicate inferences. We're trying to sight ourselves along reference fixed inferences and sight ourselves along them through an abstract lens and systemize our place along them and synthesize, and that's what we are. I mean, that's where we are in abstraction. You
That's
and I,
right. Yeah.
we have this idea that we're just talking to each other through a screen. And to a degree, it is that. But when we abstract, it's not that. And therefore, it's like if all the philosophers in the world come into a big stadium and I said, right, let's all of us just switch off all our senses, that they're gone. Not just,
Yeah.
they're gone. They're not here. Then what are you all? You're just all floating in the darkness with trying to systemize inferences on
Yeah.
every subject. Therefore, that's the landscape.
Yeah.
That's the landscape.
That's the landscape. Yeah.
That's an inferential landscape. It's an inferential matrices. That's where we are. And we draw, like I said, we create topological nets around them so we can occupy each realm and understand it and so on. And, build our minds around sets of axioms. And it gives us a certain kind of meaning, a semblance of meaning. And we follow certain paths. And that's been guiding us since, God knows, but here we are. But
Perhaps we are the topology itself
we are in the darkness.
as a medium.
We are in a darkness, and that's the trippiest sense of all. And that would scare most people. Most people didn't know how to think with the conditioning of self and not to disengage from it and actually realize, no. You're a blind fish in an ocean of molecules. You're a blind fish in an ocean of molecules, and your ability to see is to systemize inferences. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's the landscape, because there's no out here. It's in there.
Yeah.
And that's how we trip on shit like that, and we get a feeling of belonging and remembering something. I think we're remembering that.
Yeah. There is a sense in which creatures see themselves as separate from the world, and they're fighting against a world which doesn't necessarily conspire against them, but it's a world that could harm them. Um, you know, and if it's in the interest of the creature to self-preserve, um, it's forced to behave a certain way. Even if it has free will, it's still
Yeah,
conditioned to behave a
yeah,
certain way.
yeah,
And perhaps, I mean, perhaps death is the freedom of all of that, and you just go back to being,
yeah,
the universe itself. It could be something like that. But it's the experience with the mushrooms certainly made me think about how people conceptualized those experiences thousands of years ago when they were talking about Brahman and the Atman. It
yeah,
made me think, even as a physicalist, I thought, oh, could there be something to the idea of a Brahman, the ocean, and
yeah,
we are currently the drop,
yes,
but really there's just water because it's all the same energy. And then it made me think about physics. Well, it's after all, they do say that metal and wood, it's the same energy at the subatomic level. It's all the same energy, finding different expressions.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but consciousness has always niggled at me. It's that thing in the
yes.
background that, as a physicalist, that always plagued me. It's like there's something not quite right about the physicalistic worldview, because
Yes,
it doesn't explain. It seems like, because I saw everything as being made of matter, devoid of mind. Consciousness just seemed like something magical, like something that didn't fit anywhere.
analogy.
And
Yeah,
it's the
yeah.
very thing that we are. So it's almost
Yes,
like
that's right. You
yeah,
can't unthink from it. Sorry, in meditation, you can move from ego into pure consciousness, but you can't move out of pure consciousness into ego. You can't just disengage from consciousness. You can disengage from ego. It doesn't work the other way. I
that's
can
right. Yeah,
disengage from ego. Okay, I can't be an ego and go on as man and disengage from consciousness. It doesn't
yeah,
work that way.
yeah,
Consciousness is the default setting. The system is the default setting. That's what we go back to. The default
yeah,
setting, and that's what we are, and that's why we want to understand it. Consciousness
yeah,
wants to to know itself. It seems to be the case. It's
It seems to
asking,
be the case, definitely.
and therefore we must, keep our light on that. Because what else is there? At the end of the day, we're trying to. The one thing guaranteed about our species is we're trying to figure out what we are. No one can deny that.
Yeah,
So, whatever it is, and we are trying to figure it out. And so we have a conscious lens, and we have a materialistic lens, and that's it at the moment. Do you know what I mean? Like, so
yeah,
we have to work with what we're prescribed to see. End of story. And that's the garden we're in. We're trying to figure out, that we were stuck in dualism. We're stuck in, we are where we are because of it,
yeah,
and because we're presented with it. And we're asking questions about what we're presented with. And we're such an amazing species. We're gone right down the rabbit hole, right as far as Planck's constant right now. And, there's so much knowledge, the Brahman, all of that age and those paradigms, that was the first stages of connectivity and this feeling of a species, obviously waking up and being connected to
yeah,
something, asking
yeah,
questions that stand to this day. But we've gone deeper.
yeah,
We went down, I'm not surrendering in the Buddhist sense to it all. No, I want to know it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I want
yeah,
to know the river I'm in. I want to
yeah,
go in after it, and the river is full of molecules. I want to go further. What the
yeah,
fuck? It's a molecular river. It's not water, it's a molecular river. So
yeah,
I want to go down into it. And why do I have the apparatus? And the thing is, it's all about regimentation and flow. I call it regiment to flow, or structure and function. So if you
yeah,
want to learn piano, you have to regiment yourself around the chords, and then when you know them, you flow. If you want to learn kung fu, I love the kung fu analogy, but if you want to learn kung fu, you have to regiment it. Do this and do that, and regiment your body, and then when you know it and embody it, you flow. Okay, so we
yeah,
orchestrate our mind around what we need to know and embody, and that's an ability we have for everything we enter. So we're trying to regiment reality, and when we know what we are, we'll flow.
yeah,
No, we don't know what we are. We're trying to regiment it. We're trying to understand structure and function so we can function in the correct manner. So it's all going on, and
yeah,
it's all going on, and that's just I wake up every day to that, and it just gives me a big tickle. Going, what an amazing species! Like,
yeah.
what I don't. I often hear people talking about humans need to be wiped out and leave it to the animals, and that's because you don't understand this beautiful species. It's a
No,
developmental species where you can't criticize a half-finished robot, and we're not a fully finished product yet. So I don't criticize something that's not fully finished.
exactly. Yeah, we're
So
wonderful and
we're
full of potential. Yeah,
irrespective of our transgressions, we are a monkey coming into alphabets, and
yeah,
it's majestic. And the fact that we're trying to understand it and stimulate one another, and we're aroused by phenomenal ideas.
yeah.
I love every moment of that.
Yeah. I like what you said to Matt. You said something along the lines of we persist off the back of something that exists.
Yeah,
And it's like a doing that always persists and it's
yeah,
becoming
yeah,
it's dynamical, it moves, it's a
yeah,
creation, not just a set creation
yeah,
uh that's static. It's something that moves across time. It's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
And
yeah.
if
We
people
don't,
don't appreciate that, it's
yeah.
yeah,
We
you
don't, yeah, we persist. We didn't cause ourselves to come into being. You and I arrived on this planet. We exist on the back. What exists is what is, the ontological existence, and all the extensions of it are persist on the back of it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? We persist for about 80 years if we're lucky. But the system itself, the systemic eye, the conscious eye, seems to exist. That's the existing factor, and it wants to know itself because that's all there is to know. At the end of the day, all knowledge of man and all of that is all incidental to the bigger picture. Incidental knowledge, it's all incidental. It's
yeah,
like boat building is knowledge of boat building, but it's incidental to the knowledge of what things are. The same with all the different fields of knowledge we're involved in are knowledge of that field. Knowledge of kung fu, knowledge of boat building, knowledge of building computers is knowledge of that field, but it's not knowledge of what
yeah,
it's a physical knowledge. So what's the metaphysics? That's all incidental. So all our knowledge of the heart and how it functions and the cells are all incidental to the body. It's incidental knowledge, and it's relative and real and beautiful and profoundly brilliant. And we need to understand it, so we can utilize
yeah,
our energy in the correct manner. But when it comes down to the abstract lens, and we want to know, the abstract lens wants to know what it is, the spiritual, systemic. What the fuck am I? What's the knowledge of that? Everything
yeah,
is incidental to that. Everything
yeah,
is incidental. Why does it know that? Because it wants to know itself. There's
yeah,
nothing. There's nothing to know out here. You can know of the body and certain things of it. And in the end, there's nothing to know. It's common. There's nothing in the body of itself. It's the
yeah,
thing that sees that. It's not afraid of that. It's like, all right, the body is just the infrastructure I travel through. It's just the infrastructure of my
Yeah.
headset, but I'm traveling through a great, river of
It's
life.
almost
And
like a baby. There seems to be like this innate curiosity to know. And the more it knows, it wants to know more about that one thing it's focused on.
yeah,
And then
no,
it
so
realizes that the more it knows, it realizes that it doesn't quite know enough, or,
yeah, yeah,
it becomes aware of how much it doesn't know. And then, it gets to the point where you find yourself in a relationship with the infinite, and you realize that you're so
yeah,
limited, you're so finite, you're so blinkered, and
yeah,
it's awesome at the same time. It depends on how you frame it. Some people become depressed by it,
yeah, yeah.
Other people think, oh wow, there's no end to exploration.
That's
It's
right.
we can do, we can act and do and dance forever, and we should take pride in that freedom that we have. There's no limit to what we can do. Otherwise, it would feel like a prison, wouldn't it? I mean, I don't know. That's how I tend to think. I think
Yeah.
some people, yeah, some people just take the depressive route.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I like what the Irish philosopher and poet. He used to be a priest for 19 years, John O'Donoghue, and he got into him recently. He used to be a priest, and but he said, the church forgot its metaphysical journey into God, and he actually said to an audience of Catholics in Ireland, he said that story of God and the cross and the heaven and the angel, we made all up. We made that up for you to keep you controlled. I mean, he said that, right? But he said, I love this point. He said we have to make God dangerous again. We have to shake up reality. We have to, to me, the systemic eye, is that a God eye trying to evolve, trying to
Yeah,
emerge? Maybe it's not, but it's still the thing that's asking the questions. So let's refine it and find out what it is, it's its capacity and limitations, so we can know it in ourselves and embody it in whole. But so we have to ask questions which bring into question the churches and the religions, and saying, sorry, it's not the God on the cross, it's not the magic man in the sky, there's some kind of a metaphysical entity traveling through the body conduit. Is it that? And shake it up and ask complex questions of it, and
yeah,
to make God dangerous again, to make it exciting,
yeah,
and because that's where that's like I said, when we come to know everything of the body, if we can, then we know it, but it still doesn't answer meaning. And even if it says the brain fools us into thinking there's meaning this way, well, we'll still go, but we want to know the meaning and why the brain fools us into thinking there's meaning.
yeah.
We can't,
That's
right?
right.
Because we want meaning. We
Yeah,
want meaning in the whole universe. We don't just want half measure of meaning. Like
yeah,
we're not just saying what's meaning, we're saying what's meaning in relation to the fucking whole thing.
yeah,
That's what we want. We're little monkeys wanting that answer. Do you know
yeah,
what I mean? We're not settling for anything less than all right, I get it. And even if it is a physicalist, materialist world, well, then it's a lot more complex than we ever thought,
yeah.
because the consciousness arises with this abstract lens that can see into all realms and ask questions of it. That emerged fabulous.
Yeah.
We might,
Even the nihilists don't seem to escape meaning, because when you ask them, what does life mean to you? Well,
yeah.
it means it has no intrinsic meaning. And that's what life means to them. That's how they're viewing it. And yeah.
Give one of them a kick at the testicles and they talk all about meaning,
How do you feel now?
How do you feel
Yeah.
under pain and oppression and crime and what I mean, like and
Yeah.
undermining your sovereignty, and who am I to do that, and
Yeah.
the immoral act, and you're suddenly in the realm of meaning, and
Yes, in the
because
realm of
someone
meaning, and
you,
the realm of qualia, it's what the illusionists deserve, a kick in the balls, because they tend to say, oh, experience consciousness, it's all an illusion. It doesn't really exist. Some of them go as far as to say it doesn't really exist. It only seems like it does.
yeah, yeah,
If they get a kick in the balls,
yeah,
I would
yeah.
think that they would rethink it. They'd have to rethink it, surely, because is pain an illusion? I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
why are you crying right now if it's an illusion? What are you
yeah, yeah.
crying about?
Why are you trying to give nihilism meaning? Meaning to no meaning. It's like there has to be meaning to no meaning. To
Yeah,
give
yeah,
meaning. It's the what is meaning is the question.
that's right.
And I also feel they live empty lives. At the end of the day, if I'm deluding myself, I'm very happy in my delusions. I feel like I'm plugged into an amazing mushroom trip, and I fucking
Yeah,
love every moment of it, and I feel very happy, and the world feels
yeah. It's
very
still meaningful. Yeah,
and I like giving meaning to all the men and women who sacrificed their lives for me. I like giving kudos and spiritual meaning to all the individuals who've sat down behind closed doors and put alphabets together for me, for engineers and people who put printing presses. I don't want to be void of that. You know what I mean? I don't want to be that empty person that has no meaning. Even if it's just out of choice, I choose to give that real meaning. I choose to give it a spiritual domain because that's what holds it up best. That's the real truth, real solid, majestic magnitude. Even the fact that we can think with magnitude has magnitude. I love the mode of magnitude, to think with the magnitude of the cell, to think with the magnitude of evolution and our place on it, magnitude. So that's part of the spiritual window. So yes,
absolutely.
I feel they live empty lives and blessed. I feel they're more impoverished. And, hey, look, it's a big game of chess. We're all trying to make moves. Everyone's welcome at the table.
Yeah, exactly. It does feel like a game of chess, and if your goal is to win, then you have to abide by the rules. But if
Yeah,
you don't care about anything and you don't care about winning, then you can just play willy-nilly. It all boils down to what you want, what your aim is, really, and just because there are set rules, it doesn't mean that you don't have free will. I mean, really do think that it's just the conditions because we can all wish to fly unaided by aircraft, for example.
yeah,
We can all dream about being Superman, but we
yeah,
can't. Does that mean that we don't have free will? Well, of course it doesn't. I mean, we
yeah,
still dream about flying like Superman. We can still fly in dreams, and
yeah,
if we could, we would. I mean,
yeah,
why is it that we're able to say, if I could fly like Superman, I would?
yeah,
If reality could allow me to do that, I would. There's
yeah,
still
yeah.
a will that's free to imagine that, a will
But
that's free to want that.
I question free will in many ways because also, once again, we are not here to be free. The spirit, so the system, how free is the system? Well, it's kind of, to me, it's a tautological wrap because it's designed to arrive at its own nature. So it's
Right.
tautologically wrapped up. So there's no freedom in that. So I might ask of us, what am I free to do? Well, for example, talking about water, CO2, water is wet, water quenches our thirst. I like to swim in water, waterfalls. We're structured to see water a certain way. We're prescribed to see it a certain way, and we can't talk ourselves outside of it. Now, we can say things that are gobbledygook, but that just leaves the matrix, it just leaves the
Right.
framework. And
So in a way, we're conditioned by the
we're
things that we
conditioned.
perceive.
Yeah, so I don't see it as free. I think freedom, free will is kind of a word, an idea that got in the way. I don't think it is freedom. It's just, I see it as becoming. Just the system is becoming. Now, in the body, while it occupies the body, I mean, we're like puppets on chemical strings. Where is our freedom? If I'm hungry, I talk hunger. If I'm thirsty, I talk thirst. If I'm
Yeah.
angry, I talk anger. So my opinions are set by the way I embody these
Yeah.
states. There's no free will in that. And
Yeah.
I don't know where to leave free will. And even my ideas, my deepest ideas and metaphysical ideas are still structured. I'm still set along a bed of axioms. I'm still structured to see it a certain way. I'm prescribed to see it a certain way, necessitated to see it a certain way. So, and the only freedom I seem to have is yes, no, evolution, move towards, move away from, eat, don't eat. It just yes, no. Now, yes, no gives us a
It
huge,
feels like a decision making in the
it's
way.
a decision. And it
Yeah.
opens up, well, yes, no, do it that way, not that way, that way.
Yeah.
It's goes as far as here. But
I see.
whether
So
I
so
don't,
there is a will that isn't necessarily free, but it can feel constricted and it can also feel free depending on the circumstances. So perhaps it boils down to experience. If you feel free,
yeah,
then you are free. If you
yeah, yeah.
don't feel free, then you feel constricted. You feel imprisoned. You feel
Yeah.
like you can't move.
Well, it's
Uh,
like saying I can move 1 + 1 = 2. I can decide 1 + 1 = 5 or 10 or 20
yeah,
to infinity. So it gives me the impression, the system, that I can move along infinite numbers of variables, and therefore there's infinite number of ideas, but there's not. We're still restricted. It still comes back to 1 + 1 = 2. That's what I'm prescribed to lock down on. That's
yeah,
the systemized position, you see. So when
yeah,
we get into reality, if reality is structured in that manner, and I believe it is, the system it plugs into to reality the way reality is. So we're not free to see it any other way. So there's no freedom. So like I said, freedom of will. I just feel it kind of it's. I just see it as becoming. We're just becoming, and we can't.
yeah,
Our nature set a certain way, and we have to act in accordance. Now, the thing is, if we kind of give our body and mind all the health and food and knowledge it needs, well, then we do function in a more functional way, and that gives us a broader sense of freedom. We can live freely in that
yeah.
sense. We can
That's right.
become and emerge in a sense that gives us full freedom. But then nobody would want to operate out to be free to do anything else. If everyone was in a utopian framework and everyone could have clean air and, so we're all happy and good. We can't fly, obviously, but in relation to our own physical constraints and mental, spiritual constraints, we're all able to live full lives. Well, then nobody would want to be free to do anything else.
That's
You
right.
see,
That's
so
right. Yeah.
what is freedom? So I feel freedom kind of smudges the lens. I feel like it has to be discussed. At the same time, it's just a state of becoming, and we have to
Yeah.
become what we
Yeah.
are. Yeah, yeah,
Actually, I said something like that to Matt yesterday
yeah,
because I had a conversation with him and Stephen. I said to him, if we lived in a utopia where everything was taken care of,
yeah.
there would be no opportunities. There would be no impetus to do anything, no real reason no challenge,
I
no,
don't. I would question that because we have the impetus to look after our children. Yes, we all want the food, everything done for us, but we still have a species. We have the will in us. We still want to know. Good. I have everything done for me right now, and I still want to know. I have my apple and my water, and my son is happy, and I have warmth. The radiators are on, and I have blankets, my TV. I have a computer to talk to you. So I have everything I need right now. So, but I still, as soon as I get off this conversation, I'm back to my work. I have the impetus. Yeah. So I
yeah,
find this, and people. I've always noticed that people who are innovators, they do it regardless of any recompense. I mean, if you put in a life's work and you get recompense in this paradigm, in this framework, then fine, I'm cool with that. As long as you're not a greedy fool and you think materials
yeah,
serve you. But, there's always been the impetus to move forward. There's always been the logos to drive, regardless of anything, to make a new spear, to make the bow and arrow, to figure it out, to write the alphabet.
right. So
People
there
have put.
will always be infinite possibilities, regardless of what's taken care of.
Yeah,
That's a new take. Yeah. Yep.
when I was in India, I had a beautiful moment where 12 of us went up to a mountain for the night and brought our sleeping bags and everything we needed, our didgeridoos and guitars and our spliffs, and going to have a great time up in the mountain in India. And when we got there, I knew some of them well, and I was getting to know other people, 6 degrees of separation, lovely people, all happy and buzzing. But as soon as we
Yep.
arrived, two of the girls, two of the women, they just set about in these bushes with all these threads and spent about 5 hours making a temple out of thread. Yeah. And then he just said, there's a lovely space for anyone who wants to go in there and meditate. And I just saw the beauty. I said, like, people just do that off their own back.
Yeah.
And our own devices, which is the best way. We are like, people just do shit
Yeah.
and inspire people, and other people just feel better because there's people doing it. And
Yeah.
we have
And they
nurses
can
and
be whimsical. They can be impulsive. They can do anything just off their own backs, really.
our
They
seven
don't.
million our 7 million year journey tells us all you need to know about impetus, regardless of if we had a utopia around us or not. That's just helps us thrive while the impetus shines. When
Yeah.
we provide the things, all society needs to do is provide the things the body needs to thrive
Yeah.
and to love and respect. And we all get warmth from the core, from love. And we all find everyone loves to be treated right. We like that person. It's built into us. It's a priori. It's
Yeah.
built in. We love, respect him. We don't want to be around arrogant people, and we don't want our children to be arrogant. And we want to be polite and seen and witnessed. And when we see that in people, we light up.
Yeah.
And look, you and I met for the first time ever here, and look at the lengthy conversations just open with two human beings who've never met.
Yeah.
That's what we are as humans.
Yeah. Yeah. We
So
love interaction. That's
yeah,
what
yeah,
it's all about. Yeah.
yeah.
I wanted to ask you. But by the way, I love that song "Fish Out of Water." I think it's the very first song I heard
All
from.
right, yeah, fishing in the water. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's that about? Because it's quite. I get a picture of doom and like the fish can't breathe anymore, and they've stepped outside their comfort zone. Perhaps it's a positive thing because sometimes
yeah,
it can be positive to step outside of your comfort zone to try new things because it
yeah,
encourages what's that? Encourages progress,
yeah,
improve self-improvement.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
wondering if it's about that or if it's something else.
Well, the chorus, I can't remember all the lyrics so many years ago, but the chorus was, "I turn it on again and you're gone. I turn it on again and you're
Oh
gone.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Some you win, some you lose. The fish are out of water. So that we're just fish out of water, okay? And you
Right.
turn them on for them. You turn them on in politics. You turn them on in music. You turn them on in philosophy. You turn them on again and they're gone. Like you talk you in and they're gone from it. And you play the music and we go from things. We come back to things because we're just some you win, some you lose. We're just fish out of water. It's just
Yeah,
it's the
yeah,
acceptance of there's no dominance over it. It's just the way we are.
yeah.
After that, it's
I've got
just
so many compilation CDs. and so many different styles of music. I've got bebop, jazz CDs even, and I like the way it flows and changes, and for some reason jazz tends to remind me of um, movie scenes, like Casino. Bebop in particular makes me think of films like Casino, gangster films. Um, but I also like nu metal. I love it so much, and I've got songs by Nothing Face. Um, the more rap metal music from Rage Against the Machine,
I've seen him
and
live. Seen him
yeah,
live. Yeah.
yeah, and they actually um, Rage Against the Machine and 1 Minute Silence. They seem quite similar in a way.
We were in the media, the British media. We were kind of classed as the Rage Against the Machine of Britain, and
Oh, I see.
sometimes we didn't like the label because you're always under it then because they're one of the best bands ever. But
Yeah,
but we were rap metal. We had that political
yeah,
energy. And we were a great live band. I mean, we
yeah.
won best
I,
British
I
live.
liked the bass sound as well from 1 Minute Silence.
Great.
It's heavy bass and it reminds me of
Dirty
Mudvayne. I
bass.
know you guys toured with Mudvayne, didn't you?
Mudvayne, yeah, toured with Mudvayne, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a great story about Mudvayne.
Yeah.
Proper hardcore band. The lads were lovely, all down to earth, but tattooed, tattoos everywhere, yeah. And myself and Glenn, my bass player, we were, sound checking one day, a lovely sunny day in America, and we went off for a walk to get some food. And we just walked by a nail salon. And who was sat on the two chairs? Only Matt and Ryan, the drummer and bass player, with their feet up and their toes, with a lot of cotton buds everywhere, getting fucking their nails done. We just went like, the image of two proper hardcore heavy metal tattooed loons. Yeah. Amazing band, amazing musicians. Yeah. And
Yeah.
we just popped in and goes, dudes, like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
In a nice way. And they said, oh, they were laughing. They said, no, this is the one little luxury we both enjoy on the road. It's a monthly thing. Just to switch off
Oh,
the amount of energy on the road. Yeah, it's a big. So now it was beautiful. That was their way of
yeah.
meditating. They
That's
just
brilliant.
sit with their feet up and their nails for an hour and get them done. Nothing wrong with that. But it was just a beautiful image to see of.
Yeah.
The fans
That
didn't see that. The fans didn't see that. Like,
no.
you know,
But it's funny. It's funny.
amazing band. Ryan was as far as I was concerned, the best visual and talented bass player ever to watch. I mean, what an energy on stage. He's unique. Can't take your eyes off him. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
spectacular just to watch. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I do like their album Dig. Yeah, I'm heavily into new metal, and I also am a fan of Slipknot. Still am. I still find them interesting.
We,
What were they like on tour, by the way?
we
Slipknot.
toured, we've done more tours with Slipknot than any other band. I mean, we spent months on the road. And because our band was a smoking band, lots of bands drink. Clown and Sid, two of the members, Sean Crane and Sid, the two of them
Yeah,
joined our tour bus and because they like smoking. And so we all fit into our vibe. It's a different vibe than alcohol, yeah. So we toured on the road with them and for months. And the truth is, they all became great friends. And they were nine lovely fucking lads, just nine down to earth lads. You couldn't meet Corey, the singer, and all that. But of all the people I ever bonded with on the road, now I had more time with Slipknot than anybody, but Sean Crane, Clown, one of the founding, Clown, one of the
yeah,
founding.
the clown. Yeah,
That's when Clown became real, genuine friends. Real. We haven't been in touch for a few years now, but we will be in touch again. I met his family, his mum and dad, his wife have been out of the house. He's been in my house. That kind of friendship because
yeah. Oh, that's
Clown.
beautiful.
And I always say Clown was one of my favorite humans to hang out because he's a philosopher. Naturally, I used to tell him that the way
Wow.
his unique lens into the world, he's a unique person. He said to me, the reason we had to have masks when we started the band, he said, and the reason we wear masks, he said, because everyone wears a fucking mask, he said, and I wear a clown mask, he said, because everybody I fucking look at is a clown. Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? The masks represented what he saw in front, nine lads from, Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa, lost in the world, nine working class lads trying to get
Yeah.
out of fucking ghetto, if you will. And that was their view of the world. And I just thought it was beautiful, fuck this world, fuck everything that it stands up for, even though the world is beautiful. But, sometimes that
Yeah.
sentiment
It,
is needed.
it's the fuck off attitude I love about
You need that
metal.
too. It's
Yeah.
poetry. You need that. It's poetry.
Yeah.
And, that catharsis. And so, but he was just a phenomenal, he gave me so many beautiful insights to the world. And I actually loved hanging out with him. We used to hang out round the clock and
Yeah.
I love every moment of Clown. Beautiful
Yeah.
human. Yeah.
No, it's true.
He's,
We're all
he's a philosopher.
yeah, we're all wearing masks. We all have personas for everything,
Yeah,
depending
yeah,
on who and what we're dealing with.
yeah.
It's so true. And people were so eager to see their faces for the first time. But it's you
Yeah,
know, it's part of the act, but it's also symbolic, isn't it? You know, we're all
yeah.
wearing masks, really,
We're all wearing
and the
masks.
clown in particular, it reminds me of a quote by Carl Jung. Um, but he didn't say clown. He said the fool. The fool is the precursor to the savior, and it goes to show that we all
Yeah,
make mistakes,
I
but we can
love that.
learn
That's
from our
beautiful.
mistakes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I love that. That's a great quote. That's great. Yeah, the fool is the precursor to the
To
savior.
the
Yeah,
savior, yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you think of clowns in the circus, you know, when they first try to juggle, they drop their balls and the children start laughing and they
yeah,
go,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then they pick up, and the more they do it, then they start juggling perfectly, and there's a round of applause, and
yeah,
I think it's so profound. It just teaches people that it's okay to make mistakes. We learn from our mistakes. So
yeah,
right
yeah,
there, the clown is kind of like a precursor to a savior. It's almost like a prelude introducing the savior, and the savior saves you, doesn't he? He's saying, look, you've come a long way, but now you've improved. You know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's beautiful. Yeah, it's
David
profound.
Bowie David Bowie's quote about, he said, age turns you into the person you wish you'd always been. And it's
Yeah.
so, yeah. And I know that now in my life, in my late 50s. I was even writing about it last night, and the journey through, childhood into teenage years, adolescence, and then trying to grow up in your 20s and 30s and 40s. And
Yeah.
that journey, you don't really arrive at yourself until you're 40. And then add nearly 20 more years onto that, and you you arrive on the mountain of self. You're out of the neurosis if you haven't lived it, if you're out of the trauma, yeah. If you forgive the world, I'm bright enough to be out of the trauma, yeah. And the appreciation of life, the appreciation that comes, the deep rooted appreciation of life when you've embodied it enough, yeah. So age is a phenomenal journey, and it's we think of it as all getting old. No, it's a phenomenal privilege and journey to finally grow up as a human being,
Yeah.
and to wear reality with deep perspective. That's a real honor, and I've been really having gratitude and looking at myself through that lens lately. The journey to arrive at self, and you really don't know it until you get here. You just don't know it. What it fully
Yeah.
means to fully to engage, and yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah,
We
many
can
steps.
only imagine if we're going to become wiser. And ironically, as the aphorism says, the child is the father to the man or something like that. You know, the child comes
Hmm.
first
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and gives.
That's so
It's
beautiful. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's
it's
so
true,
true.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
so true. Yeah, and then the goal is to retain, to keep the child within. To be
Yeah.
alive in the playground of life. I tell my son as a philosopher, I'm alive in a playground, Joe. Life is stunning. Like the boredom out there. He said, we're all bored from time to time, but I'm rarely bored because I'm a child I'm excited by everything. To open the
Yeah.
new physical package, I'm excited by things, and that's the child in us. That's important.
Yeah. So
Not to
true.
become serious about the world we have to survive in. That's just part of life.
Yeah.
If you get lost in that, then it's just a storm. But if you remember you're in a playground going around the sun, I mean, it's an amazing playground.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It just goes to show that we ought to get in touch with that inner child, and
yeah, yeah,
because it's so full of possibilities. It's remembering that early stage where the world just looked so, before we become biased by all these constructs, everything, this is what it means, this is, everything appears to be set. It's almost like the older we get as we go into adulthood, we're sold this dogma, this
yeah,
vision of reality that's so constricted, so reduced,
yeah,
and children they're just open to so many possibilities, aren't they?
That's right, and that's how we need to be open to possibilities. My son said to me, he's a teenager now, and he said, "Dad, I'm not going out to the shops as you." He said, "You're just like a big child going around." And I said, "No, Joe, I'm just myself." And he goes, "No, Dad, like you're like a 5-year-old. You can start doing the robot in a shop and embarrass him."
Yeah,
But and I said, "But that's the way your dad is, Joe. Yeah, I'm just a happy being. I'm just a bubbly being. I like life. Yeah." And I'm glad that childish spirit is within me. Picasso was always trying to get back to the child so he could paint without the ego.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like children
yeah,
don't think; they just draw, and then suddenly we go into the ego, and it gets in the way. And it has its own distorted lens. But Picasso, how do we paint? How do we, approach it with no ego? That free flow.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah. How are we doing for time, by the way? I don't know if you're quite happy to end it here or.
Yeah, well, yes, actually, I need to go get some food, but I hope we
Yeah.
can continue this conversation another time. It's been just really,
Yeah,
really,
no, definitely. I mean, we're going to be keeping in touch.
yeah.
We've got Chelsea off as well, so
Yes,
we
I'm
can
going to
have
get down to the
conversations.
next one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, there's going to be a social soon, I think Matt said. So, yeah, and you're always welcome to come back here. So, for
Yeah, yeah.
another deep conversation. And thank you so much for, very nice to meet you. And you are truly an inspiration.
Oh, thanks, Orlando. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
no,
Yeah,
I really rate you, man.
yeah,
It's unbelievable. I wish I could be a bit more like you because when you speak, it just flows. Feels like there's a that divinity inside you that just finds expression so freely and with such ease. It's when I hear you speak, it's inspirational.
oh, well,
I
thank
want to be a
you.
bit more like that, but I just feel like my brain is a bit too restricted
Yeah.
at the moment. It could change. I don't know.
Well, genuinely, you're an inspiring, beautiful human being too. And I've heard your talks online and chatting to Matt. And I love all humanity, but I do love the nerds like us, who are trying to find answers. To me, I love the nerds. I love being a
Yeah,
nerd.
definitely. Maybe I could come down one of these days to Wimbledon. It's only
But
down the
please,
road,
please
isn't it?
do, please do. I'd love to welcome you here. I'll cook some food. We'll chat the night away. Yeah, you're welcome.
Brilliant. Yeah.
You can come and crash here. You know what I mean? Like, there's loads of room, and that would be great to have you. And I've invited Matt too, and I would definitely down your
Yeah,
way.
we should try and get Matt down here as well. Yeah.
Brilliant,
Yeah,
Orlando.
he's not too far away, so.
Yeah, whereabouts are you? What area?
Oh, I'm in well, near Twickenham. It's not quite Twickenham, but
Oh,
yeah.
you're just around the corner. I tell you what, let's sort it out soon. Come over for some food and we'll chill out. We'll sort it after the weekend. Yeah, I'd love that. Yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
Hey,
Sounds like a plan.
we're neighbors. That's great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Thank you
nice
so
one.
much.
Thanks.
And
Enjoy your weekend. Yeah.
you too. Take care. Yeah.